Rain drips heavily on the roof of an old barn against the backdrop of a gray, cloudy sky. The living dead hang around the wooden, flimsy structure, looking for victims. A man is desperately knocking on the door outside, trying to escape from the bloodthirsty creatures, screaming to open it for him. From the screams of the person outside, the frightened people sitting inside become even more frightened. 3 schoolboys are holding the barn door, preventing a person from entering from the outside. A blonde girl comes to the aid of a man knocking on the door. He is their classmate, and they cannot leave him. One of the guys holding the door objects that the door is full of zombies. Most likely their classmate has already been bitten, and it is extremely dangerous to let him in. The blonde stands her ground, declaring that she takes responsibility for the consequences of helping her classmate. He is still talking, which means he is not infected. He should be allowed in if they still have a conscience. The guys agree that as soon as one of them opens the door and lets a classmate in, the other will immediately close it. As soon as the door opened, one of the angry zombies immediately leaked inside in search of food. The people standing inside watch in horror as the dead man attacks one of the guys holding the door. It turns out that the classmate knocking on the door is a zombie. He is infected and aggressive. He pounces on the main character and presses him with the weight of his body to the floor. The guy, trying to defend himself from the dead man, puts his hand forward and the zombie immediately bites him on the forearm. Brandon seems to be experiencing a sense of déjà vu, a moment of realization. Everyone runs in panic, even more monsters break into the barn, and the main character has to saw off his infected hand. Already, old Brandon lies in a high-tech capsule. The switch connected to his device is switched. Brandon abruptly finds himself back in the moment when a classmate knocks on the door screaming. Trying to come to his senses, he freezes, still holding the door with the guys. Head girl Jessica again asks to let in the person standing behind the door in order to help him, since he is their classmate. Brandon seems amazed to see Jessica young again. She stands her ground, persistently ordering her to let her classmate into the barn with them. The guy remembered this day forever, and now he is finally here. The mechanic made it so that he would come back and change everything. He objects to Jessica, explaining that there are a lot of zombies outside, and his classmate has most likely already been bitten. She confidently claims that if anything goes wrong, she will take care of everything. Brandon agrees with her and steps away from the door, moving closer to the girl. He bows theatrically and invites Jessica to open the door of the room herself. The others watching their altercation are silent, waiting for Jessica's answer. The indignant elder asks which of them is the man, tries to appeal to the guy's conscience, to which he only giggles. Brandon states that people like her can only talk pompously and always leave the dirty work to others in order to ultimately take all the glory for themselves, bluntly calling her hypocritical. Insulted, Jessica undertakes to do everything herself because she has never been afraid of anything and is not afraid now. Pushing aside the guys holding the door, she goes to the entrance and tells them to move aside and calls them cowards. She only manages to put her hand on the door handle, about to open it. An infected and already pretty battered classmate of the guys immediately bursts in. The guys, in a panic, realize that the door has swung open. The door falls to the floor from the force of the blow. From the sharply opened door, Jessica falls painfully to the floor and tries to come to her senses. In the doorway, a zombie looms over her who was once their classmate, a healthy person. The frightened guys in the room realize that he is infected and tremble with fear. In an attempt to escape from the monster, the headman clings to one of the guys. They are at a dead end and have nowhere to run. In a panic, she pushes one of the guys straight towards the zombies in order to save herself. Immediately, Brandon decisively kicks her in the side, pushing her straight towards the dead man. He grins contentedly as he watches the blonde being captured by the hungry ogre. Having grabbed the victim, the zombie opens its mouth wide, preparing to bite off part of its flesh. But unexpectedly, Brandon saves her by piercing the dead man's head with a heavy wrench that he had prepared in advance. Blood from the blow gushes onto the pale and frightened Jessica, while Brandon's face expresses calm. Still grabbed by the monster, the girl falls to the ground with his lifeless body. Pressed against the corpse, she desperately asks the standing guy for help, hoping that he will free her. He's been bullied by Jessica all his life, and now he thinks it's her turn to be on the other side. Picking up the door from the floor, he puts it in place, ignoring the questions and screams of the lying blonde. Brandon orders the others to stop standing and help him barricade himself. Together, they put a lot of weight on the door so that no one else can enter. Jessica is actively knocking outside and hysterically orders to let her in. Inside, not paying attention to her cries, the guys are intently holding the barricade. The head girl continues to try to convince them to let her in since she is the head girl, and they can't do that to her. People are scared and frozen in fear. and those holding the door are doing it with all their might. At dawn, the girl stopped screaming and banging on the door and disappeared somewhere. Classmates behind Brandon's back begin to whisper and discuss his actions. Turning sharply to them, the main character scares the guys, who are already on the verge of a nervous breakdown. When asked if they are afraid of him, they answer in the negative, albeit unconvincingly. One of the guys holding the door thanks him, because if it weren't for Brandon, he would have died because of Jessica. The others agree that the girl deserved such a fate, because everyone would have died because of her. Fortunately, Brandon reacted quickly. Otherwise, they would have had big problems. He smiles at the guys and asks them to open the door so he can go outside and look around. They ask him again in fear, not quite understanding whether this is what he means. He explains that it was really mean of him to kick the girl out, and he would like to go out and see if she's alive. Having met with a refusal, he angrily and loudly shouts for them to open the door. It works, and having removed the load from the path, the door is moved to the side, giving the guy passage. Brandon calmly walks outside with the proverbial red wrench slung over his shoulder. Taking a couple of steps away from the barn, he notices that the prefect and their zombie classmate are nowhere to be found. Shielding himself from the sun with his hand, he assumes that the zombies have left because of the dawn. The door behind him closes sharply and with a loud bang, cutting off the path to the shelter. He hears them barricading themselves inside, believing that he is a bastard and too dangerous. Who knows who he will kick out next time? In response to this, Brandon just grins and moves on with a wrench. Seeing this through the window, the guys are excited by his action. They were stunned that the guy had no intention of returning to the barn, and they wondered where he had gone. One of the guys notices that a walking dead man in a red dress is walking towards the guy. They see him walking straight at the zombie without trying to run away from him and consider him sick. The walking dead this time is a woman in a red dress and an outstretched neck. Brandon grins and flips the key in his hand to get a better grip for the fight. He leans his whole body forward for a wide swing and a good dead man's blow. His classmates did not expect him to rush forward. This confuses them. Swinging vigorously, he crushed the monster's head with a sweeping blow. His classmates, seeing this, freeze in horror. They break out in a cold sweat from such cruelty. They call him crazy. Tiredly leaning on the key, he hangs over the corpse and breathes heavily. From the pieces of the crushed head, he takes out a green ball. Light emanates faintly from it. This is energy black gold, the source of doomsday and an indispensable item for mechanics. At this time, a dead old man in a white t-shirt and trousers approaches him from the side. With a flourish, he kills him too, cutting off his head with the key as before. Observing this, his classmates note that he has changed a lot. Just recently, he was a timid and inconspicuous guy. Some girls cry from fear, and guys never cease to be surprised by the sudden changes in Brandon's behavior. One of them offers to let him back in so that he can help them fight against zombies, but the second immediately argues with him because Brandon is crazy and unpredictable. At this time, the window is broken with a wrench, and Brandon threateningly asks if they are going to sit here, suggesting that they go kill the dead, because it is so much fun. They manage to shout to him that there is a dead man behind him, a man in a suit that is already pretty shabby. Brandon manages to push him away and smash his head with a key with a wide swing. The corpse falls to the ground, splashing blood everywhere and staining the guy himself. Initially, the main character wanted to go with his classmates, but given that he can mutate, he decides to part with them here, admitting that he does not intend to harm them. In parting, he expressed the hope that this time they would all be able to survive. They didn't expect the guy to leave like that, so for a couple of minutes, silence reigned in the room. Doomsday is the beginning of the end of humanity. The zombie virus has swept the entire world, infecting 50% of the population and causing complete economic and political collapse. The number of zombies grew every day, and people living in fear and despair fought each other for living space and food, plunging into endless anarchy. A professor who was considered an expert on zombies called this time the Dark Age. Because of the Elder's action, zombies bit Brandon's hand, and then he had to amputate it in order to survive. After this, the suffering did not end, and he had to wander, starve, and endure violence for 50 years, until he met a mechanic who, with the last of his strength before his death, sent him back in time, to the moment when everything was just beginning. The men watching the guy at this time are surprised by the schoolboy's carefree gait, suggesting that he was mad with hunger, and decided that he had nothing to lose. One has the idea of inviting him inside, but the second is against it, because perhaps the guy is already infected. Brandon approaches the playground, where the dead are swarming, hanging around colorful buildings. The creatures that notice his presence run after him in an attempt to eat him. One of the observers notices this, The second only grumbles that this is not the best time to look for food. The main character deftly fends off a zombie attack by waving a key. Amazed male observers note the brutality of Brandon's fight. Another spectator is watching him. The woman irritably vows to kill him sooner or later. The zombies continue to approach the guy. There are more and more of them. Brandon begins to run away from them, swearing that because of the little noise they were being chased like this. People watching him through the window realize that he is running towards them. He actively knocks on the roller shutters asking to be let inside. Noticing the CCTV camera, he looks straight into the lens and reports that he is wounded and monsters are chasing him. The old man believes that after he has stirred up the crowd, even the least idiot will not open the door for him. Around the corner appears the figure of a dead man running after the victim. The guy in the suit fought off the dead man with a practiced blow. With ragged blows, he tries to fight off the rest of the crowd of motley creatures. Among them women and men all looking for food. Brandon manages to slip through a small gap in the roller shutters from below. Behind him, the blinds close and the dead hammer on the metal, their prey running away before their very eyes. The main character got up from the floor and realized that he was in a supermarket building. There were goods on the shelves, mostly food. Hidden behind the cash register, a girl with bows on her hair quietly watches him. The guys at the window are discussing Brandon and his fierce fight for survival with the creatures. One of them turns to Scolopendra, telling him how the guy dealt with 6 zombies alone and was able to get into the store across the street. An intrigued man sits on a kind of throne and makes the assumption that apparently zombies are not so strong. If the schoolboy could do it, then they can too. The leader of the gang of men thinks. Brandon, at the store, notices movement behind the register and orders her out. He also asks to quickly give him the remote control for the roller door, demandingly putting his palm forward. Without waiting for an answer, he sighs heavily, tired and dirty, covered in the blood of monsters. He puts on a show, pretending that he is suffering from an open wound and asking for help. The girl runs out to him, her legs covered with plaster, and she herself is dressed only in a large shirt. Brandon grabs her right arm tightly with his dirty palm. He demands to give him the remote control in exchange for freedom from his tight grip. The frightened girl tries to pretend that she does not understand which remote control we are talking about. Noticing the aforementioned remote control in her other hand, he tries to take it from her. A guy viciously kicks one of the food racks with a dirty sneaker. He calls the girl stupid and berates her for believing him and his lies about the injury. Brandon is lying on a dirty bed. A girl in a shirt is fussing over him. While bandaging, he clenches his jaw in pain, tensing his whole body. After this torment, the guy awkwardly thanks her for saving his life. She says that it is very dangerous outside and that is why her father told her to stay in the store. The girl tells the guy to rest on the bed while she brings food. Lying alone, he thinks about how he came such a long way, and only she decided to open the doors and let him in. There is a scream from below. The girl asks what they are doing here, and I shout with a request not to pass by and leave a comment under this video. Good luck to you, my beloved YouTube viewer. The man with a wry smile thanks the girl for opening the door for them. The girl, frozen in horror, thought that they were simply dying of hunger. They deceitfully deceived her in order to get to the products of her store. The girl states that her father will return soon, but the man says that they have already met him and decided to use her as bait to distract the zombies. Licking his lips disgustingly, he says that there are only them here and no one will bother them. While she's being brutally tortured, Brandon just sits scared in the corner, trying not to make sounds so as not to be caught. She was tortured and killed, and all because of excessive kindness. Then he could only hide in that corner in fear. But now he is determined to repay the debt and be sure to save her. And first, he wants her to realize that there is darkness under the sun, even if it makes her think that he is a bad person. The girl carefully knocks on the bathroom door where Brandon is. He responds angrily by shouting, demanding that you not interfere with him while he's in the shower. From his sharp and rude answer, the girl gets scared and apologizes, explaining that she brought him clean clothes. The guy orders her to leave her clothes at the door and get out immediately. A drooping girl with neatly folded things in her arms stands uncertainly. The guy grumbles, dissatisfied with the girl's obedience, because it will be difficult for her to survive in their post-apocalyptic world. But he immediately turns his attention to the shower. He could not wash himself for a long time and completely enjoys the warm water. As the number of zombies increases, more and more sources will become polluted. In a few days, the water is expected to be cut off here, the guy remembers, turning off the water. Fortunately, they are in the store, so the supplies here will last for quite a long time. The next thing he plans to do is search for equipment and weapons. Looking at himself in the mirror, he notes that it is nice to see himself young again. Young and tender skin, no back pain, no pain in the legs. It's good to be young, he concludes. The only problem is with the abs. You will need to work on the muscles in this area. The main character, wearing only a towel, opens the bathroom door. A couple of minutes later, a scream is heard from him. He is unhappy that the girl gave him a suit, because it is inconvenient to fight zombies in it. The gang leader gathers all his subordinates at headquarters. He reports that this karaoke bar has alcohol and food. But you can't stay in this hole for a long time. You need to create another survival base to cope with future difficulties. First of all, he sets a goal to go out and kill all the zombies in the territory, and after that take over the store and provide himself with food. In addition, a nice girl lives in this store. The concerned bandit notes, she is the only one left, with the exception of the schoolboy who recently ran there. He gives the green light to his servants, ordering them to kill all the zombies and take over the store. The girl sitting at the cash register is eating a cookie and waiting for Brandon after his shower. The main character is indignant that she did not answer his question and tells her to get out of there. The guy asks if she lives here alone and where her family is now. She reveals that her father left to replenish supplies and promised to return, still hiding behind the counter. He scolds her for the frivolity with which she let him in here because he could do something bad. Vanessa tries to justify himself by saying that he shouted that he was wounded and she saw him covered in blood. He continues to yell at her, asking if she saw that zombies were chasing him and if she even thought about what was happening. He clutches his head and complains that such a naive coward will eventually become only a burden for him and it's better to get rid of her before it's too late. However, he will be bored alone. There is no one to even take care of him if something happens. Brandon declares that from now on she will be obliged to do whatever he says. If she disobeys, he will kill her. One of the zombies attacks a guy from the gang from behind, biting his ear to the meat. Other zombies pile on him, eating him alive as the others watch. They did not expect the zombies to go berserk because the schoolboy somehow defeated them. The leader demands that they continue to fight the creatures. One of the frightened guys, a red-haired skinny man, screams and tries to run away in panic. But the main bandit manages to grab the fleeing man by the hair and bring him back. He throws him straight into the crowd of the dead to be torn to pieces, demonstrating to the others what will happen if he escapes. In his death throes, the red-haired man screams and asks how he could do this. The rest of the gang members are tensely fighting off the zombies with improvised means, but their numbers are increasing. The leader gives the command to retreat due to the huge number of creatures. They retreat, but zombies are chasing them. A girl comes into Brandon's room with boiled noodles for him on a tray. Brandon sat and twirled in his hand the green ball he had obtained earlier. He rudely told the girl to get lost. He ordered her not to disturb him until he called her. She obediently agreed and closed the door behind her. After the door slams, the guy pounces on the food, actively eating the noodles with a plastic fork. Overjoyed by the delicious food, he couldn't help but blush at the nostalgic taste of the instant noodles. In a few years, such noodles will become a real delicacy due to a shortage of products. Having received his portion of noodles, the guy told the girl that nothing more was required from her and ordered her not to disturb him until he called. She quickly ducked out the door, and Brandon, without wasting time, pounced on the hot food. In this safe moment, food was his comfort, and he couldn't help but smile, remembering its nostalgic taste, and also saying that in the future, these same noodles will become a universal delicacy. The joyful moment did not last long, and the guy suddenly heard a noise from the street. Before he had time to think about it, there was a sharp sound of breaking glass, and a man's tough human hand appeared in the fragments. This man turned out to be an enemy from the protagonist's past, a red-haired man with a strong build, many scars on his rough skin, a cruel, pompous look with a desire for poisonous power. The guy met him with a sharp and dry look because he had foreseen his appearance in advance and had been ready for revenge a long time ago. With one hand resting on the windowsill and his whole body hanging over the ground, the man shouted at the guy to help him immediately. And if he didn't help, he would immediately kill him. Quickly grabbing a thermos of hot water, Brandon headed towards the enemy. At that same second, boiling water poured onto the man's hard palm, leaving behind a strong burn and steam. He screamed at the top of his lungs and loosened his grip, almost falling back, and the boiling water continued to pour out of the vessel, leaving him no chance of salvation. During the entire action, the guy grinned and said to the man that if he wanted to kill him, he would continuously do it first. Suddenly, Brandon's hand was grabbed and pulled back by a girl, which he did not expect. She stuttered and feebly begged him to stop, still trying to pull him away from the broken window and the man. With glassy eyes, she begged the guy to let him in quickly and not to harm him in any way. The main character instantly fixed his gaze on her and ordered her to leave the room, reminding her of her words not to enter until called. And besides, she did not even know the person she was so ardently defending. With the same harmless face, the girl stubbornly continued to babble about how her father told her that she shouldn't hurt people. There was silence in the room, and the action continued while both men stared at her like she was a fool. However, that's what she looked like at that moment. The guy lost his temper and yelled at her, "Is she really not afraid at all and doesn't foresee the fact that this man could simply finish her off?" He wasted no time, having long ago managed to change position and lean on his other working hand, and began to climb into the room, pretending to be a good-natured person, and saying that he of course did not intend to kill her or cause harm. That he was just hungry and in desperation decided to look for food, being surrounded by zombies and the only way out was to climb here. He also doesn't want to jump back into the crowd, and if the girl were so kind, she would definitely let him sit out for a while, and he would immediately leave when the zombies dispersed. Looking angrily at her, Brandon thought that he should have been pushed back into the crowd as soon as possible. Then his chances of survival would have been reduced immediately. But it was not right to kill him in front of the girl. By that time, the man's foot had already crossed the threshold of the windowsill, and the guy immediately fixed his gaze on the stationery knife lying on the cabinet. The bastard fully appeared in the room, and with a disgusting grin declared that now this place belongs to him, and anyone who dares to disobey him will die. The silly girl, naive in her kindness, was immediately horrified by his words and froze in fear. Meanwhile, the man's supporters who remained in their lair held the door with their backs, into which the zombies were breaking. The eldest of them indignantly told the boy that now, because of the idiotic idea of their chief, they were doomed to death. But they could have held out here for several more months. Their captives were hiding in the distance of the room, covering their heads with their hands, and the man kept shouting that their leader, nicknamed Scolopendra, would die in the same place where he had taken refuge. The dead almost broke down the doors and advanced more and more, and the men began to lose strength and patience. Baldy yelled at the women and ordered them to get up and help them hold the entrance. The next second, the entire group of 4 people held the doors, and the man perversely thought only about the fact that he did not have time to have fun with the ladies in the absence of their boss. And all that remains is to run to the balcony and jump while everyone is blocking the door. Meanwhile, the red-haired man stood near the broken window and grinned at the helplessness of the teenagers. Laughing at the girl, he said how sweet and naive she was, that she still let her in and believed in his kind fairy tales. Now instead of killing, he will teach her everything and make her his slave. Immediately switching his hate-filled gaze to the guy, he remembered how he scalded him with boiling water and declared that it would be too easy to feed him to a zombie. Instead, he would come up with another, more sophisticated method of killing him. First, he will crush its bones, then chop up its limbs, and when they are dry, he will stuff them into flower vases. Having met his fantasies with an indifferent gaze, Brandon readily held the knife in his hand and remained silent. And the girl kept trying to stop the villain with empty persuasion, exclaiming that their family owned this store, and that downstairs there is a lot of food, enough for everyone. Spicy sticks, chocolates, instant noodles, and bear-shaped cookies. Everyone fell into a stupor at her pitiful appearance and stupidity. But she did not stop smiling from ear to ear with an offer to eat together, and having eaten, forget about all the problems. From such a performance, the man lost his composure and furiously attacked the girl. In an instant, the main character covered the baby, and with one wave of his hand neutralized the attack attempt, cutting off his fingers with the cold blade of a knife. He burst out screaming, and the guy with the cold look of a killer was preparing for the next attack, aiming for the man's throat. Immediately noticing his action, the red-haired man grabbed the guy's hand, and the sharpened end of the metal shone with its shine, stopping exactly at the neck. Immediately, he threw the schoolboy to the floor face down, and with a hard kick threw him to the end of the room, and threw the girl to the side with one blow of his hand. Puffing in pain, holding the hand with the cut-off fingers, the man slowly made his way towards the guy. Nothing had taken so much from him in his entire life as this boy. Lying on the floor, Brandon was losing strength. It seemed to him that the man had broken his ribs with this blow. At that same second, the red-haired man pressed the guy's leg with his heavy boot, causing him to let out a cry of pain, and stated that before he kills him, he wants to know how the guy deals with zombies so easily. The guy just grinned and muttered that in this case, you should treat him more respectfully, and then perhaps he will reveal his secret. Because of that irritating answer, he became even more angry. He began aggressively kicking the guy with a force that could bring a person to death. Brandon could only cover himself with one hand. He was angry that trying to teach the girl a lesson had turned into this. He couldn't stand it and rattled for the man to stop, that he would tell him everything. He pulled him towards him by the collar and demanded that he give out information as quickly as possible. But the guy only spat blood in his face, to which the man lost all patience and went wild, throwing him with all his might into the wall. He kicked him, and with eyes full of hatred, assured the guy that all this was not a game. Otherwise, he will play with him only until his death. Starting with a kick, he continued to beat the guy with vicious kicks to the face and jaw. The next moment, a glimpse of a blade appeared, the handle of which was held by both palms of a woman's hands. Suddenly, Vanessa grabbed a knife and plunged it into the bastard's forearm. He got distracted and immediately demolished the girl with one blow from his hand with his fingers cut off. Taking the knife out of the deep wound, the man turned completely towards her. The red-haired man's angry roar filled the room, and he sharply swung the tip of his blade at the girl in order to finish her off. But he didn't have time. His head was immediately pierced by an iron pipe. Soon the man was lying motionless on the floor, face down, with a pool of scarlet blood flowing from his head, while Brandon stood behind him, leaning exhaustedly with his hand on the end of the pipe. The girl looked in fear at the pool of blood, unable to believe that the big man was dead. The palms and sleeves of her white shirt were covered in blood, and with tears in her eyes, the girl realized that for the first time she had killed a person. The protagonist's male hand rested on her shoulder with a calming gesture. The schoolboy in a quiet voice assured the little girl that everything was fine. She did what she had to do with this bastard. Vanessa looked at the floor with full eyes of despair and explained that she just wanted to help him. The girl did not at all understand such a reciprocal attitude towards herself. Meanwhile, Brandon felt the man's pulse and discovered that he was still alive. He quickly ordered the girl to calm down and go wash. With hope in her eyes, the little girl sadly asked the guy, and she exclaimed that in this case he needed help immediately. At the same moment, Vanessa was already flying straight to the door. All that could be heard was the guy's angry insults and parting words addressed to her. Afterwards, Brandon locked the door and headed towards the big man's body. How this girl annoys him. With thoughts that this freak had ruined his room, the guy grabbed him by the leg and dragged him to the window in order to get rid of him once and for all. After he reached the broken window, he began to hang the body over the sill. With a kick, the man flew down under the indifferent gaze of the protagonist. The crowd of zombies immediately smelled the smell of human flesh lying motionless on the wet asphalt. At that same second, the man was surrounded by the dead on all sides. He could only live the last seconds of his life in agony. As parting words, Brandon shouted to him that if he had a better knife, he would have cut off all his limbs before throwing him off. Suddenly, the guy looked to the side and saw the youngest of their team frantically climbing down the wall of the building opposite. The schoolboy called out to him and asked if there were survivors where he came from. The guy answered in the negative and said that while they were trying to barricade themselves, someone loosened their grip, as a result of which the zombies were able to break through and kill everyone. Only he remained alive. Afterwards, he hopefully asked Brandon if he could help him and assured that in this case he would come over to their side. With a tired gesture, the main character refused the guy and advised him to run away if he did not want to end up in the place of their main character. Quickly glancing down, the guy realized the situation and jumped to the side. He managed to find support as a balcony railing and not fall down, after which he quickly ran in the opposite direction. The main character only carelessly looked down at him from the window from where he had recently thrown the corpse out. He was upset that the zombies didn't eat them all, and then shouted to the guy so that he wouldn't get in his way and cause problems. Meanwhile, it got dark outside, and there was the sound of a door opening, at the threshold of which Vanessa was still sitting, pressing her legs tightly to her. Brandon only reproached the girl. He asked her to take a shower. Why was she still sitting here? But she only silently looked through the crack at the traces of blood on the wall and windowsill, to which the guy asked not to look at him. The man was already below. Again, with hope in her eyes, the girl rushed at him and asked if the man had escaped. Laughing at her naivety, Brandon explained to the girl how he could resist a crowd of zombies, unless he was human. Seeing the blood, the girl is upset. She does not understand why our hero killed him. Brandon got angry. He slammed the wall above the girl and began shouting that she didn't understand anything, and if she turned to him kindly, she might get a knife in the back. He says that in order to survive, they must kill people like him, that the real end of the world has begun. The girl is scared from her facial expression. You can understand that she did not know about the beginning of the apocalypse. Brandon realizes that it is useless to talk to her, and calling her stupid, he goes to take a shower again. The girl, in an attempt to say something, runs to him. But right near the stairs, she loses consciousness and falls off her feet. The main character catches her and does not understand at all what caused her current condition. He takes the girl in his arms and takes her to a more suitable place so that she can lie down. The guy examines her body and does not find any bruises, so the assumption that she was injured disappears. Touching the girl's forehead, Brandon realizes that she has a fever and begins to search for medicine in the cabinets in the room. He knew that something was wrong with her. He tries to remember what happened before, but it doesn't work because it was a very long time ago. Among the books and other things on the shelf, with the help of efforts, he finally finds a first aid kit. Between the pills and other things, he notices a strange pink notebook, which immediately attracted his attention. Having opened it, the first thing he read was that there was a list of donations written there. The girl writes there that she received chemotherapy only thanks to people who decided to help her from the bottom of their hearts. Therefore, in the future, she also wants to be kind. The guy, analyzing the contents, finally realized that it was a medical record. Looking at the unconscious girl, he began to understand what was happening to her. After reading her card, Brandon learned that the girl was 14 years old and had leukemia. Rolling up his sleeve, he saw a lot of bandages on her hands, hiding the wounds. It was for this reason that she wanted to save that damn bastard no matter what. But the world has changed, and at this time there will be no place in it for kindness from a pure heart. He felt something strange in his pocket, and then remembered that he had little green zombie balls. Brandon doesn't know if this can help her, but apparently he decided to try it just in case. On the streets filled with crowds of converted zombies, dawn slowly begins to dawn. Early in the morning, Brandon woke up, yawning, began to pull himself up, and slowly came to wakefulness. He noticed that behind him, with the door slightly open, that same girl was peeking at him. Our hero asked how she was feeling, but did not receive a clear answer. Deciding that everything was fine, he asked her to prepare breakfast, namely instant noodles. When the girl was about to leave to run an errand, he called out to her again. Brandon told her to pack all her things because he was going to find her father. She froze in one place, confused as to how to understand that they would be looking for her dad. The guy explains that they will go to the store where the father went for supplies in order to quickly find him and leave the girl with him. The girl says her dad told her to stay in the house until he returned, lock the door, and not go out. The guy frowned and sternly asked how many days he had not been returning home. "About 3 days," she answered, looking down, and apparently beginning to understand that the situation was going badly. Brandon, continuing to put pressure on the girl, asks how much time he usually spends to replenish supplies. Nervous, she replies that it usually only takes about half a day. Brandon suggests thinking about what could have happened to him if he doesn't come back for more than this time. The girl is scared and starts screaming that nothing could have happened to him, that he called and said he would be back soon. The main character continues to stand his ground and repeat the same thing to get his point across. There are two options: either the father has already been captured by zombies, or he has fallen into a trap and is waiting for rescue. And who else can save him if they don't go looking for him on their own? The girl resists. She's too obedient to disobey her father. This is starting to drive me crazy. He's probably in trouble right now, and she doesn't want to go and save him. Brandon starts screaming because she wanted to save that Gopnik, but is not eager to do the same with her father. The guy doesn't ask her opinion. He could kill her and leave, but he wants to help because she saved his life. In a rage, he yells that the girl had better shut up and quickly get ready as he ordered. In fear, she runs away from him and without noticing anything, falls down the stairs again. A car in camouflage paint is rushing at full speed into a crowd of standing zombies. The zombies wanted to attack, but she, without stopping, knocks down and runs over everyone in her path. At the store, Brandon collects supplies such as pasta and various canned goods into a bag. He turns to the girl peeking out from behind the shelf. Why is she hiding there, and is she ready to move on? She chose a beautiful blue dress and a pink bag in the shape of a bunny, to which she receives the remark that she dressed up as if for a picnic. Brandon, telling her not to pay attention to his comment, asks about the noodles he asked her for and receives a positive answer. Sitting in complete silence, you can only hear the main character slurping while eating his noodles. He comes up with a plan of action, deciding whether he can leave the girl alone and come back for her later. At this time, the baby is sad, lowering her gaze, and eats the delicious food without thinking about anything. Seeing the sharp sticks in the girl's hands, Brandon reaches out to ask for one for himself. At this moment, a car crashes into the wall at speed, dropping the rack with all its contents. The guy covers the girl with himself, protecting her from falling things and thinking that this is caused by an earthquake. Then they saw that having run over all the zombies outside, it was a huge machine that did this. A plump man in a military uniform comes out of it with joy about what a good store he found. The military man crushes the zombie's head, saying that they are good when they are dead, despite the fact that they are the walking dead. Taking a huge bag, he is going to take for himself everything that is in this store. Patrick grabs everything from the floor, especially chips and bear cakes, because he loves them. Most likely the rest of the supermarkets in the city have already been looted. So after this, he will have to go to more distant places. They put a knife to his throat from behind and order him to leave everything he took in place. Brandon threatens him that a porker like him obviously doesn't want to go to zombie food. Turning sharply, he throws packets of cookies at the main character's face to distract attention. Having grabbed all the loot, he goes on the run and tries to quickly get into the car and leave. But the guy about to kill him climbs into the car through the window and threatens him with a knife. The huge man is frightened by such a gesture and begins to ask Brandon for mercy. The girl didn't like this, and she screams at our hero to stop killing people. After everyone's attention was paid to her, she slightly reduced her indignation and continued more calmly. Her store was damaged because of him, and if Brandon kills him, there will be no one to pay for the damage. The price for the store will be his car, and they also lack a driver, and this man looks like a good candidate. Brandon tells the little girl to go get her luggage and load it into the guy's car. Patrick makes an excuse that he just wanted to eat and would not have rushed into the store if he knew that there was someone there. Holding a heavy bag in her hands, she turns her attention to something in the distance from them. A group of zombies have appeared there again, and they are rapidly heading towards them. The fat guy just crushed all the dead guys in the area, and this is something like a new batch. Brandon ordered to quickly get into the car, and Vanessa, in a hurry, falls into the back seat. Patrick, driving, warns everyone to fasten their seatbelts and is about to start driving. He puts the car in reverse, and as he gives it up, he crushes all the zombies who are going to eat them. The fat man pulls out so sharply that Brandon and Vanessa, who did not have time to buckle up, are thrown all over the car. But the driver does not slow down, but on the contrary, squeezes full gas and continues on his way. It gives him pleasure when he dashes into a turn, demolishing all the dead people in his path. Brandon is outraged by this behavior, as if he wants to kill them and threatens to kill him for such a trip. The driver is immediately lost and makes excuses that he must get rid of all the zombies before leaving. The main character asks the girl where her father might be now in order to tell the man where to go. She answers who the last time they called each other. He was at the Eastern Market. Patrick says that it's bad because there were always a lot of people there, which means it's overcrowded with zombies. Brandon, threatening with a knife, asks for less whining because if he was told to go there, let him do it. The man asks permission to turn on music, otherwise it's boring on the road, to which he receives the answer that he can't make noise. In this case, he wants to sing himself because he does it well. But an irritated Brandon asks him to shut up. There is a zombie on the road who is stuck in a tree branch and our hero's car is driving towards him. A car hits a dead man, and his remains are spread in small pieces all over the highway. The man sings and laughs as he knocks over another zombie girl, clearly enjoying the process. The main character tuts and asks him to calm down and let him sleep so that they will be killed later. It's boring on the road, and the man has to entertain himself. The car is durable, and such blows will not harm it. Brandon freaks out because doesn't Patrick understand that he's just asking him to stop? The man stops the car and receives a disapproving response that they asked him to stop the singing. Patrick begins to yell at the whole car in hysterics because it has run out of fuel. The main character is completely angry because they drove halfway, and he never thought about refueling. The situation is worsened by the fact that they are not nearby. While the man is eating enough to die full, Brandon tells him to get out of the car and distract all the zombies to himself. Vanessa howled in fear as a zombie's face crashed into the window of her seat, wanting to eat her. Zombies began to surround their cars at such a rate they could die on the spot. Brandon notices that in the seat pocket there is a huge knife, like a machete, in a sheath. Without hesitation, the guy opens the car door with his foot and pushes the zombie standing nearby. A zombie attacks him, and Brandon pompously and with a clank takes out the weapon from their case. Little Vanessa watches as Brandon cuts the zombie's head, and blood splashes onto the window. He notices that a plump woman who has turned into a zombie is creeping up behind him. Brandon shouts that an ordinary knife cannot kill such a fat zombie and plunges his own into his head. But on the other hand, 2 more dead animals are running towards him, and he immediately pays attention to them. Pushing the rotten body away with his foot, he cuts through its head in one sharp movement. Immediately after this, he swings and pierces the head of the zombie under his feet. Patrick, watching this, was inspired for him. It was bold and very cool. Brandon asks the fat guy to leave quickly, but receives tearful cries that he is afraid to leave. He yells at him to calm down because if Patrick sits in the car, he will die sooner or later. While they were driving, there were a bunch of cars parked on the side of the road, and, if they were lucky, they would find fuel in them. Brandon says he will clear the road while Patrick pumps gas. The guy hopes that he knows how to drain gasoline because he was chatting about cars all the way and receives a positive answer. The main character tells little Vanessa that she should stay in the car, and she agrees. Patrick says he's not mentally prepared, but the guy snaps that he just needs to prepare a few bottles. Even if there is still soda in the bottles, the fat guy will just have to pour it out. Decisively, the guy has already begun to clear the road, killing the climbing zombies. Patrick regrets that he didn't intimidate them back in the store, but who knew that this would happen? The man calls out to the guy, to which he receives an angry question from Brandon. Why is he standing still? He says that he suddenly remembered that there is a spare tank in the car. Brandon thinks that Patrick needs to make the most of the unusual. The hero made an angry grimace, realizing that all his work was in vain. Patrick apologizes and says that there was no need to scare him so much because he forgot about it due to shock. He opens the trunk and asks to wait, saying that he will do everything now. But Brandon doesn't let him start because he suggests doing something else and refueling later. The guy, showing his fist, says that he wants Patrick to collect something for him and shows the green ball. These black beads are hidden in the brains of zombies, and Brandon needs a man to help collect them all. Patrick makes a sound of incomprehension, to which the guy demonstrates how to do it correctly. He shows the ball to Patrick, making sure he understands exactly how it's done. Patrick tries to get away, saying that this is disgusting, and that he would rather sit in the car. But Brandon, using convincing threats, famously forces the man to help him. The guy kills, and Patrick gets. But if Brandon notices that he is slacking, the next one he will kill will be Patrick himself. Patrick hesitantly looks at the stricken zombie, realizing that he must commit crime. He's already sick because zombies are already disgusting, and he'll also have to delve into their brains. Anguished, Patrick shouts that even though he is fat, zombies will still bite him, so let Brandon protect him. Snarling and continuing to defend himself, the guy responds by saying that he talks too much. Patrick, afraid that the zombies will move, carefully approaches and is impressed that the guy made a precise cut, breaking a zombie's head with a shovel. The fat man is surprised that their skull is so fragile. It's surprising because when he opens his head, he actually finds a black bead there. He looks at the green glow in them and compares them to a pearl in a shell. Excitedly, he asks Brandon if this thing is worth a lot of money, but is told to shut up and work. Patrick decides that this is what turns people into zombies and plans to keep one for himself. Having cut everyone off, Brandon decides to rest, because those remaining are too far away and there is no point in attracting their attention. He says that he has almost gotten used to his previous body, but it is not enough, it is too slow. Having looked at Patrick's accumulation, he asks how many beads he has already collected. Joyful, he holds the impressionable handful in his hands, saying what a good harvest it is. The fat man shows the result of this difficult business, and Brandon tells him to wash them and put them somewhere. Everything is going well because all that remains is to fill the tank, and they will continue on their way. During this time, Vanessa developed a fever again and passed out in the car seat. Opening the door slightly, Brandon saw her condition and, frightened, rushed to see what had happened. Touching her forehead, he realized that the situation was worse than last time and something had to be done. Deciding that Vanessa should have taken her medications with her, he began rummaging through her purse. Having found what she needed, Brandon gave her a pill and, holding a bottle in his hands, helped her wash it down with water. Patrick noticed something was wrong and decided that she had heat stroke. Then the guy snapped and told her to mind her own business. He finished refueling the car and got behind the wheel, wondering about the girl's well-being because it was very hot today, and she had been sitting in the car for a long time. But in response to the question, his own mask began to rapidly approach his face. Brandon says that this is all happening because Patrick lied about the availability of fuel and detained everyone. But if something happens to Vanessa, Brandon will cut him into small pieces. Patrick is scared and asks for mercy, saying that he will drive well and won't do it again. The main character remains in the back seat next to the baby, and they hit the road again. Patrick, saying that the boy is good with a machete, finally got around to asking his name. But Brandon replies that if he wants to meet someone, first he needs to introduce himself. Enough, he replies that his name is Patrick Mennerson, and he is the manager of a local auto repair shop. This car was left at the auto repair shop by a friend, but he never returned. so it now belongs to him. Brandon was just about to introduce himself when suddenly the car breaks and interrupts him. By inertia, the guy is thrown forward across the cabin. He only manages to lean on the machete in his hands. Brandon gets angry and yells that he decided to brake sharply again. He wants to die or something. But such a maneuver was carried out because of the fire ahead. The path to the market was blocked by burning cars. Vanessa finally woke up. The first thing she hears is the guy's sarcastic greeting. She looks out the window and sees the gate blocked. Brandon says that because of this, she will not be able to get to her father. Patrick suggests taking the bypass road to get there. It will just take longer. Brandon agrees to take the bypass, saying that they will need to find better equipment along the way. He asks Patrick if he knows of any electrical stores or gun stores nearby. Patrick exclaims a positive response, raising the index finger of one hand up, and they are off. He says that in the south of the city there is an old man who owns a forge and has great experience. The old man almost never leaves, and when the virus broke out, no one knows if he is there. Patrick says that the old man personally made the machete that is now in Brandon's hand. Now that the guy has collected enough pearls, if he has the right equipment, he can create a weapon that can be used. Patrick tells how, as a child, they skipped classes and stole melons with this old man. Vanessa signals for Patrick to be quiet because it turns out that Brandon fell asleep during his fiery speech. Getting out of his car, the satisfied man says that they have arrived at the right place. The place hasn't changed much in the last 10 years that Patrick hasn't been here. Brandon says the forge is more like a junkyard because the owner likes to collect junk. He threatens Patrick to pray that the blacksmith is alive, otherwise he will have to dig his own grave. Suddenly, 2 zombies crawl out from around the corner of the building. They have clearly noticed our heroes and will attack. Before they go in, it looks like they'll have to clean up the outside a little. Pointing to a bunch of dead guys, Brandon asks if one of them is a blacksmith. Brandon says that everything remains as always. He kills, and Patrick gets the pearls. Vanessa gets out of the car, asking him to wait, and says that she can help too. But Brandon didn't like this proposal. It was better to let her sit in the car so she would be safe. But little Vanessa says she's fine and will be very careful outside. Patrick says that she is a brave girl and has already come up with a job for her, saying that he will take care of her. Brandon lets things slide, but warns that if she gets bitten, he won't hesitate to hit her. While Brandon was clearing the way to the premises, the fat man asked the girl how old she was and what her name was. He also asked why he and his boyfriend had different last names, since he considered them brother and sister. At this time, a man was watching the company from the building, and judging by his reaction, he was not very happy with the guests. Suddenly, his subordinate burst into the office shouting about an important message. A pistol shot immediately rang out, and the guy's forehead was pierced by a bullet. Still holding the pistol in his hand, the mechanic only told the lying body that he warned him to knock. At the same moment, another subordinate appeared in the doorway along which the poor man's body was sliding, a guy whom the main character had not helped to escape at one time. The man irritably asked the frightened new guy what had happened. He reported that someone came to the forge and killed all the zombies in the area. In the same irritated tone, the man said that he had already seen this and asked if there was any other information for him. The guy said that he knew the main character and met him in the northern part of the city, how he killed a bunch of zombies alone. Lost in thought, the leader took a cigarette and gave his assistant some order. The girl immediately brought him a tray with instant noodles on it. The man poured some of the contents into his plate and threw the rest in the pack into the guy's hands. The surviving guy with grayish hair desperately managed to catch the food. Having lit a cigarette, the man called this gesture a reward for the guy and asked to talk about Brandon later. In the meantime, he decided to take his time and enjoy the show while the assistant pleasured him. He also asked the new guy to take the corpse out of the room and put things in order. Afterwards, the man asked to tell everyone that anyone who goes and gets even with these guys will receive a big reward. Meanwhile, the company near the forge finished dealing with the zombies. They agreed that the fat guy would inspect the house from the outside, and Brandon would inspect it from the inside. The guy kicked the door and saw in front of him a dark, empty blacksmith's shop with everything necessary for metal processing. His gaze fell on the anvil stone standing in the middle of the room. Time had passed him by, and the instrument was well preserved. Afterwards, the main character discovered a still-burning furnace, which meant that the owner of the forge was either killed by zombies not long ago, or he left shortly before the guys arrived. Fat Patrick appeared behind the guy and reported that he had not found anything suspicious outside, and most likely the blacksmith had escaped. The schoolboy asked him to give him the pearls and look for various scrap metal and iron together with Vanessa. He also handed the fat man a machete and warned him to be ready for a zombie attack. Having received the weapon, Patrick asked the guy what he was going to do, because they came here for weapons, of which there are plenty around. The guy ignored the first question and only explained that next week the local weapons would become useless. They needed something more powerful. The fat man was surprised. It had just dawned on him that Brandon was going to forge iron on his own. The guy got angry and quickly demanded that the fat man shut up and bring him the pearls. Quickly ducking out of the room, Patrick stopped next to the girl with words about how irritable the guy is. Vanessa just asked what she could do to help them. Meanwhile, Brandon prepared the furnace and, donning gloves and safety glasses, prepared to forge. Taking a hot piece of iron with a tool, he began to sharpen its ends with a hammer. The fat man enthusiastically watched the whole process from the side, and sweat rolled off his face due to the increased temperature in the room. The main character turned to him with a cup outstretched in his hand and asked him to pour all the collected pearls into it. With a smile on his face, Patrick quickly fulfilled the request of his now friend. After collecting, the bowl of pearls was burned on all sides with a flame. Within a few seconds, the black gold melted under the influence of high temperature and was somewhat reminiscent of a potion, from which a green glow emanated. The fat man leaned over the bowl and watched the gold's reaction with wide eyes. Brandon remained focused, and the next action was to make a shallow cut in his palm with a knife. The guy clenched his hand into a fist, and scarlet blood from the wound flowed in a stream straight into the green solution, forming a magical reaction in the thicket. Afterwards, the young mechanic removed the thicket from the fire and poured its contents onto the forged, still heated sword. Having connected with the metal, the green liquid quickly began to eat into the iron, forming a pattern reminiscent of lightning. Immediately after, the guy continued to forge the remaining parts, completing the process. Meanwhile, from the opposite side, enemies subordinate to Lo were watching the area around the forge. The newcomer was surprised at how Brandon cut zombies so skillfully and why their boss ordered his guy's head to be brought, but other subordinates were determined. One of them was, to put it mildly, unhealthy and was driven by perverted thoughts about the girl Vanessa. The oldest of them told the others that there must be a reason why the boss attached such importance to Brandon. Besides, all the zombies in the area were killed, and they would not have to bother at all. The bandits, who had been watching them all this time, decided that it was a great idea to wait until nightfall and attack. Suspecting nothing, Brandon makes weapons and does it very confidently. Patrick, who was watching the case, began to think that the guy had really graduated from a technical school. He immerses the sword in some long container and makes rotating movements with it. Patrick, who looked closely at the result, says that the texture of the blade now looks like lightning. Smiling wickedly, Brandon says that now it's time to see what the mechanic can do. Vanessa was tired, but she prepared a wonderful dinner, like a hostess, for herself and the boys. She's glad that the oven is still working and they can have a nice snack after hard work. A nasty man comes up from behind and, covering her face with a handkerchief, says that he will take her to a wonderful place. Brandon's gaze is determined and cold as he immerses himself in the process of his work. The sharpened perfect sword made by the hands of a master was placed on the table, awaiting the continuation. Patrick admires him, saying that he has only seen this in movies, and extends his finger towards him. And the last thing to do, Brandon says, picking up the electrically conductive clothespins, is activation. He touches the blade of the sword he has made, and electric sparks begin to emanate from it. Now the sword is so charged that the apparatus supplying the current has burned out from the voltage. Brandon, demonstrating and holding it in his hands, says that the second-degree sword is ready. Patrick is excited and shouts his delight, saying that he now wants one for himself. Screams are heard outside the door. Patrick immediately recognizes the childish voice of his sister Vanessa. Quickly running out into the street, they see 4 bandits who clearly did not expect this. One is holding baby Vanessa, and it is clear that she is already unconscious. One of the bandits, threatening the girl, tells the guys to kindly throw down their weapons and go with them to Brother Lo. But Brandon is already too angry. Tisking, he, not paying attention to the threats, swings the ball. After this, he makes a strong blow to the ground and green sparks scatter. The wave hits those standing closest, and the bandit with Vanessa in his arms, frightened by the devilry, runs away. But Brandon is not going to stop, and swinging again, launches another wave. The bandit can no longer be stopped. He runs away with the girl because he doesn't know what to do in such a situation. They turn back and see real horror as Brandon chops off their partner's head. The partner accuses the bandit that he should have followed the plan and not attacked the first person he met. The bandit says that they better deliver the girl because either the sword ray or Brolaw will hit them. Brandon continues to catch up, firing another beam and getting ready to kill the assholes. Suddenly, Patrick starts shouting from behind. saying that there are zombies behind him, and thereby distracts him from the case. Behind them, they see a bunch of zombies approaching them unusually quickly. Patrick notices that they came running here so quickly, as if there was honey here for them. Patrick begins to panic, thinking of running from them, but Brandon makes a different decision. Brandon swings the ball and starts a hard mash with green beams and hits the whole crowd. Patrick is shocked by what he sees. It looks so unreal that it goes beyond his consciousness. At this time, two bandits, together with Vanessa in their arms, are running away from both Brandon and a bunch of zombies. Patrick shouts to Brother Brady that they stole their sister Vanessa and they need to quickly go after them. Brandon yells for Patrick to take the car and go after them while he deals with the undead himself. Patrick, realizing that this is a good idea, rushes to the car and plans to catch up with them like old times. Very worried, he looks at Brandon's battles one last time and wishes him luck. Taking off from his place, he rushes off in his car and asks to let him save the princess. The bandits notice someone being chased from behind, also in a car, and realize that they are starting to catch up with them. They see a bus in front of them, and without hesitation, they run into the bus with Vanessa. Patrick brakes sharply, and most likely in front of him he sees a building that is his lair. He hesitates, because the bandits blocked the entrance to the bus, and he has not yet figured out what to do. Two bandits are sitting in the cabin, and giggling, they look out the window, observing the situation. Since there's only a fat man in front of them, they decide that this is the best time to deal with it. A man jumps out with a knife and says that his car is pretty good. It's good that he drove it here himself. They threaten that if he doesn't want to become a kebab, then let Patrick undress and immediately roll here. The guy in the green t-shirt is not scared. He declares that he is not a weakling at all. One of the bandits with a knife shouts that he has killed more people than he ate chickens in his entire life. The bald guy, tightly clutching his weapon, prepares to fight off a flock of bandits. Just as he was about to fight, a green shockwave rushed nearby, knocking back his enemies. The impact was so strong that it cut a nearby bus in half. Brandon approaches the bald guy with the ball. It was he who made the hit with such force. He tells the guy not to stand still and follow him, because they still need to save her. The bald man obediently agrees with him. He makes another blow with his sword to clear the path of the destroyed bus and move on. People with weapons are already waiting for them, ready to attack and kill the two guys. One of the people waiting, with a wide smile, throws a knife aiming at Brandon. But the brown-haired man easily anticipates such an attack and casually deflects the knife with his sword. The main character then swings his weapon, creating a green blast wave towards the one who threw the knife. The rest of the opponents start throwing Molotov cocktails at the guys in hopes of setting them on fire. Brandon swings his sword again, sending a stream of energy towards the barrels where the attackers were hiding. One of the bandits with a firearm admires Brandon's skill, praising him loudly. He says that he saw everything that he did. In this complete natural disaster, there is such a powerful person like him, inviting him to rise and drink with him. Raising the muzzle of his gun in the air as a peace gesture, the man says that he is very sincere with people, especially someone as talented as Brandon. When the guy, in response, silently withdraws his hand to swing to hit the man, but he brings the weapon to the girl's head and advises the guy not to be so rash. They were hospitable to his little sister, the man sarcastically claims. People are kind and respectful, so he advises not to undermine their good intentions, and he also knows the power of Brandon's weapon. The man mocks the guys, asking which will be faster, his sword or the gun he is holding in his hands. The nervous companion asks Brandon what they should do. The girl is in the hands of the kidnapper, and besides, he has a weapon. The main character loudly addresses the man on the balcony, saying that he is currently working on a major project and is worried that there will be no one to help him. The man, raising his chin, noticeably tensely asks if everyone is there. He enthusiastically says that he is a great man and they will greet him in the most solemn manner. Patrick is scared. He doesn't understand why he's ready to go up to everyone at once, and besides, they have guns. Turning to him, Brandon says that he doesn't have to go if he doesn't want to. This takes the bald man by surprise. He wonders why he asked him only now, declaring that he does not want to get into this troubled water. Running back, he shouts that he is leaving anyway and asks him not to be upset. The guy just clicks dissatisfiedly and notes the annoyingness of the leaving guy. The schoolboy is greeted by people dressed as waiters. They respectfully bow their heads in front of him as a sign of respect. These same people humbly accompany him on his way to the girl's kidnapper. The building itself is full of bandits who are very aggressive towards Brandon and ready to attack at any moment. The leader himself happily greets him and asks if there are enough people here for Brandon. He has gathered all the guys within a radius of 15 kilometers. He introduces himself by his name, bowing defiantly in a respectful gesture. He also asks Brandon's name and what he needs them to do. The guy answers his question and says that he remembers him, Law, simultaneously asking if he knows how this zombie disaster happened. The tattooed man asks again, clarifying whether Brandon really knows him. The brown-haired man points to the fact that the man was well aware of the spread of the virus and began stocking up on supplies in advance, and now he must make plans to form a gang of Twilight Dragons. Law told few people about this gang. Brandon is becoming more and more interesting to him. But he is much more interested in black gold. Brandon is sure. He holds one ball in his hand. Laughing loudly, the leader agrees with him and asks him to lay out everything he knows. He should know these several versions about the spread of the virus. The first is that the virus appeared as a result of the failure of foreign research on bacteria. And through migratory birds and insects, this virus spreads throughout the world. The second is biological weapons. There is no more convenient means of warfare than allowing the enemy to self-destruct. But the situation has gotten out of control. The third is even more absurd. It is of extraterrestrial origin. A meteorite containing a virus fell to the ground. The meteorite burned up in the atmosphere, crumbled into particles, which then penetrated the human body. Surely Law heard one of these versions before returning from the city to the countryside to assemble his gang. The leader justifies Brandon's assumption he does know one little secret about the virus. However, after much thought, he still did not understand how to use these pearls from zombie skulls. The man asks the guy to tell him more about how to use these pearls. He agrees and asks first to help him prepare the necessary props. The leader answers positively, but asks in exchange to let him look at the guy's sword. He raises the hand in which he holds the sword. Law remembers that his little sister, the girl with the bows, is still there on the chair, trying to scare the guy. Pointing the gun at his head, he subtly threatens Brandon with her death. The main character, gritting his teeth, gives the sword to the leader's servant, unable to withstand the weight of the sword. The servant can barely hold it in his hands. He tells the boss that the sword is very heavy and puts the weapon next to the leader, on the bench. This time, pointing the gun at the guy, the leader demands that he begin his performance. Doomsday came precisely because of the outbreak of the virus. People became infected with it overnight, and a black pearl formed in their brain. These pearls are called energy black gold, and over time they accumulate energy in the dead body. Energetic black gold adapts well to flesh and metal, and can be used to create powerful weapons. Lo, who listens to him, repeats the understanding that black gold adapts to flesh and metal. He asks whether it is possible to make an elixir from it that will grant immortality. Brandon replies that some tried to eat the black gold, and most turned into zombies. Law grabs the word majority and interrogates the guy, asking about the others and what happened to them. First, Brandon suggests looking at something else and warns that he will only show it once. The first step was activation, the student says as he begins his performance. He touches the black pearl with metal rods, which creates an energy sphere. The power of the pearl's energy creates a short circuit in the electricity, turning off all light. This disorients everyone in the room, leaving the gang members in complete darkness. Law realizes that the energy gold caused the electromagnetic pulse. He didn't think that was possible. Taking advantage of the moment, Brandon immediately grabs his sword, lying on the bench. He rushes forward and prepares to cut the leader in half with a flourish. The leader manages to dodge, but his shirt falls off, which the guy successfully cuts into even pieces. An angry man opens chaotic fire on his opponent in an attempt to fight back. Brandon carefully dodges. The bullets ricochet and injure the gang's men. Taking the sword more firmly, the guy manages to cut the enemy in the stomach area with a precise swing with one blow. The leader of the gang of Twilight Dragons, Law, has come to an end, concludes the victorious Brandon. When he found out about the uses of black gold, he forced the Shadow Dragons to help him in the research and development of various types of weapons from this material. Within the limits of his power, there was only violence, slavery, and massacre. None of this was left aside. Before they succeed, Brandon must destroy them completely and not miss a single one of them. He strikes quickly and accurately with his sword, killing all of Luo Xiang's allies. Brandon has probably already become a butcher in her eyes, but he can't let her witness everything that happens. He wants the girl to realize the cruelty and ruthlessness of the apocalypse, but does not want her to be drawn into it. Noticing movement in the direction of the door out of the corner of his eye, he suddenly grabs his sword, ready to repel the attack. But it turns out to be the bald guy who escaped earlier. He awkwardly walks inside. Seeing all the corpses, he assumes that Brandon is already finished here. He confirms this. He accomplished the purpose he came here for, Brandon reports, grabbing the firearm. The bald guy asks in surprise if he did all this just for the gun. He thought Brandon came here to save the girl. Small arms are extremely rare in this area, and there are many opportunities to upgrade them. Thinking about improving the weapon, the guy suggests that he make it electromagnetic or laser. He mentions that pretending to let the guy leave and ordering the pearls to be placed in the generator beforehand was a brilliant idea. He didn't expect that one such small bead could blow up an entire generator. It was awesome. The foot of a girl hiding behind the counter accidentally touches a bottle, making a noise. Hearing this, Brandon points his weapon at the source of the sound, ready to shoot at the threat. In fear, she asks not to kill her, putting her hand forward in order to somehow defend herself. The bald guy shines a flashlight in the direction of the lady, and Brandon asks what such a girl forgot in such a place. The girl, trembling with fear, says that she was caught and brought here by the murdered law. He used her, humiliated and tortured her. She asked to save her life. Then she probably knows where his warehouse with supplies is, the hero asks. The girl justifies his guesses and humbly undertakes to accompany them to the warehouse. The bald guy asks where she came from. She reports that her house was in the western region. Her sister disappeared when this disaster happened. The girl freezes in front of the elevator. It is de-energized, so she won't be able to use it, but the storage room is on the 6th floor. Brandon tells the fat guy to take Vanessa and find a room with her, and he will go up the stairs with her. Among the heap of dead people, there was only one living guy left, and trying to get out, he simply asked for help. In front of him, he sees a lifeless body. This is his boss, and unfortunately, he is dead. He sees a black bead in front of him, and with the last of his strength, he reaches out to pick it up. Carefully examining it in his hands, he recognizes the object and understands that it is energetic black gold. He remembers how the boss said that it helps to become immortal, but many who tried to eat it turned into zombies. The guy, realizing that he could die, throws the bead into his mouth and swallows it. The reaction followed instantly. He was seized by convulsions and his whole body was warped. Vanessa woke up on the bed and the first thing she sees is Patrick. She asks him what happened. Patrick replies that she was kidnapped by bandits, but everything turned out okay because brother Brandon dealt with them. At this time, the main character enters the room, and the little girl personally asks if he is okay. The guy downstairs found a lot of useful things, but he won't be able to take them all alone, so they'll start tomorrow. He didn't keep track of that girl, most likely. She ran away while he was looking around. Patrick finds this strange because there is a thunderstorm outside and she can't just run away. Brandon is getting ready to go to bed and asks the fat man to go downstairs and lock the door so the zombies can't get through. Vanessa says that let his brother rest and she can help Patrick. The fat man is touched by her thoughtfulness. There is a thunderstorm and heavy rain outside. Raindrops drum on the glass, making a pleasant sound. A girl with blonde hair takes a shower and, closing her eyes, enjoys the moment. The door opens and a man looks in, asking if she's finished showering. Vanessa is outraged because he sees her naked and asks him to get out of there. The man replies that she cannot drive him away in her own house. He only inquired about the situation in order to move on to the next action. The girl is angry because now she understands what the man's original goal was. The man has a terrible grimace and says who else could have sheltered the girl who had been wandering the street for several days. He is very glad that she did not mutate, but free cheese only comes in a mousetrap. For the provided shelter, he wants her to pay with her body and tries to get into her booth. Trying to defend herself, she holds the door with all her might and begins screaming for help. But unfortunately, there is a thunderstorm outside the window, and no one will hear her screams except stupid zombies. Suddenly, the wall behind them collapses, as if someone somehow wanted to get inside. The man got scared, grabbed a knife to defend himself, and began to look to see who would appear. It was a huge monster whose body was twice the size of a normal person, killing men at a time by piercing its body. The girl who was watching what was happening gets scared and hides behind a wall nearby. In front of her stood the same guy who ate the bead. Because of it, he turned. The girl screams in fear that a monster is standing in front of her, and he doesn't even know that he has turned into one. The guy tries to deny what is happening, and repeating that he is not a monster, he wants to turn back. He does not understand why he has changed so much and does not look like ordinary zombies walking the streets. The girl realizes that he is not a mindless monster but cannot make out what he is. The guy says that he was shot and was dying, but after eating the bead, he seemed to turn inside out. Jessica repeats what she just heard to make sure she understood everything correctly. He says that he had nothing to do, so he tried to eat the gold, thinking that it would save his life. Jessica begins to get angry and scream when she hears the name of a guy she knows in a guy's story. She comes up and grabs him by the hair, asking where the guy is now and when was the last time he saw him. The last time he arrived in Shannon and killed everyone with some strange energy ball. The girl asks the guy to take her to that place and she will tear Brandon to pieces. The guy says they can't defeat him because he's too strong and asks what happened. Jessica says that it is because of him that she wanders looking for shelter, and that she hates him with all her heart. She's outraged that this guy just finished off a man in a second, and she doesn't think he's strong enough. The guy replies that he doesn't know how it happened. There's barely any energy, and he can't control it. With bitterness and hope in his eyes, he asks the sweet girl if she is afraid of him. This question seemed very funny to her, and loud laughter erupted throughout the room. Touching the face of the guy who turned, she says that he is very strong and powerful. He just needs to help him kill Brandon. A girl named Jessica asks the monster for a favor, promising that in return she will fulfill his every wish. The monster, holding the girl in his huge hands, agrees to the deal and expresses his sympathy for her. Jessica, clearly pleased with the monster's response, managed a slight smirk. Suddenly, with his head in his hands, the monster begins to scream intensely at the top of his voice. The weather was clear outside, and the sun's rays illuminated the windows of the huge building. The main character is about to put his weapon in his bag, and a heavy-set guy in the background is looking at the package of noodles with interest. Patrick, turning to his comrades, invites them all to leave this building. A group of 3 carry supplies as they carefully descend the stairs. The guy in the green t-shirt is surprised to see that the roof of his Jeep has been damaged. Because of what happened, the guy in the t-shirt is unable to come to terms with this situation and begins to cry bitterly. The fat man wonders how the roof of the car could have been so damaged. The main character decides to help his bald friend, to which he is surprised. Suddenly, with one swing of his sword, he removes the broken roof of the car. Having gotten rid of the top, the car now has the appearance of a real convertible. The bald guy is happy that his car was able to work well again. Patrick also asks the main character where they should go next. Fat Man enjoys the moment while driving his convertible. Suddenly, zombies began to appear out of nowhere, shouting throughout the area. A group of panicked school children ran as fast as they could, trying to escape the herd of zombies that were relentlessly pursuing them. Not expecting to meet his classmates, the guy is surprised that they are still alive. A guy and a girl, clutching each other, are running in horror from a zombie invasion. Having sharply twisted her leg, the girl complains that she is unable to continue moving, to which her classmates reacted with alarm. Suddenly, the main character instantly cuts off all the zombies' heads with his sword. A group of school children stood in silent amazement, their eyes wide open at what they saw. The guy's classmates were shocked to find him in such an unexpected place. Brandon greets his classmates, not expecting to see them. Classmates, who breathed a sigh of relief, began to thank the guy for saving them from zombies. One of the guy's comrades, impressed by his sword, asks with interest where he bought it. The guy decided to ask his classmates where they were going. The blonde guy said that they heard about a camp with survivors where they were going to go, but were afraid of zombies along the way. One of his classmates, pointing to the car, asks Brandon to give them a ride. A short-haired classmate plaintively asks a guy for food because they haven't eaten anything since yesterday. The girl looks worriedly at the guy's classmates through the car window. Unable to bear such pressure from everyone, the guy shouted loudly at them. The main character claims that there is not enough space in the car for all of them, but they can share food if they help them in one matter. 2 of the hero's comrades quickly agree to his proposal. Brandon turns to the fat guy to explain what they have to do. Patrick, leaning out of the car, glows with happiness that he has finally been assigned the job. The guy turns to his classmates to rob the dead zombies while he deals with other zombies. The fat guy begins to explain what they will need to do. He shows them the thing that will need to be pulled out of the zombies. Classmates are perplexed by the challenge facing them. The girl tells the others that there is nothing complicated in this matter. While the girl was forging a thing out of zombies, the guy was watching all this with disgust on his face. The fat man gives the kids tools to pull green pearls out of zombies. The guy's blonde friend doesn't understand why he needed these green things. The guys, with great reluctance, began to forge a black pearl. The fat guy is delighted with the large amount of pearls collected in the bag. The young man asks the fat man to share food with his companions, while the fat man admires a job well done, after which the fat guy is indignant in response, not wanting to give away his food. Hungry, Patrick and his friends compassionately begged Brandon to keep the food for themselves. The only thing that gave pleasure at such a time, another guy and girl stood behind them with their hands folded in a pyramid. The next moment, a roar of twisted metal shook the street. The steel monster landed on the hood of a car, standing centimeters from the group of friends, like a meteorite, causing Brandon to flinch. This monster was unknown to the group except Brandon, who was shocked that one of the black metal users appeared in front of them, also in broad daylight. Brandon needed to act quickly. There were too many people nearby who constrained his capabilities and space for maneuver. He called on everyone to run. In the blink of an eye, he unsheathed his blade and swung at Steel's throat, feeling that the fight needed to end as soon as possible. The flexibility of this monster was amazing with truly ballerina grace. He dodged the blow and jumped several meters back, landing in front of Brandon. But the sword-bearer's feelings, brought to the limit, were caught by the clapping of his hands. Jessica intervened in the fight. The blonde, with undisguised joy and a smile on her face, said that she had finally managed to find Brandon. Classmates couldn't believe their eyes. Jessica, alive and full of strength in all her glory, now stood in front of them and smiled, although her cold corpse was supposed to become food for worms. Having greeted her classmates impressively, Jessica only grinned at their surprise. She'd gone through too much with the sole purpose of seeing Brandon's mortal body give up its last breath in agony, which she immediately notified him about. The blonde imperiously pointed her finger at Brandon, ordering him to attack. The satisfying grin did not leave her face, but Brandon did not understand all this picture. Jessica was ordering the monster. This is something new. Brandon couldn't believe that Steel and the blonde were working together. Together, something was wrong here. Their mutual assistance was unnatural, incorrect, and incomprehensible. The monster was rapidly approaching the sword-bearer, and Brandon prepared to attack, taking a stance and raising his sword at the ready, covering the fiend with curses. The monster was already a couple of meters from the guy, and Brandon was already preparing for contact. But the fireball landed with an explosion and a crash right between the duelists, blinding both with the bright light of the flame. The attention of all the people on the street was attracted by a humanoid figure, but terribly thin and elongated. The body of this monster was engulfed in flames, and the deer skull, instead of a head, let out a roar. A light breeze rocked the yacht and lightly stroked his hair. The man in the small bay enjoyed peace and relaxation, for the zombies could neither swim nor fly. This calming feeling of security was also shared by the waiter, who poured champagne into the glass at the right time. The contented mood of the fat man with a Cuban cigar was fueled by the prospect that, besides them, the bay was filled with other yachts and other vessels, from which resources could be extracted if necessary. The idyll was broken by a deafening explosion, which immediately took the blissful smile from the face. An explosion occurred on the ship on the side of their yacht. The fat man and the waiter peered into the fire, trying to discern the cause of the explosion. A shadow flew out from there. A fiery fiend, like a meteorite, was rapidly approaching the two men's yacht, its deer mouth spewing flames, and its claws did not promise anything good. The cry of horror and fear seemed to be heard for the next few kilometers. The appearance of the creature was so frightening that the couple's legs were filled with lead. They could not take their eyes off the figure, while not stopping screaming. The crash of the burning ship was supplemented by a deafening explosion of the yacht. The monster jumped onto the roof of a nearby building and seemed to be looking for something. Brandon couldn't believe his eyes. Another black metal bearer was right in front of him. One user of such power was rare, but two, also so close to each other, it was too suspicious a coincidence. Jessica was no less surprised than the swordsman. She also saw this fire creature for the first time in her life, not even suspecting that there were other users besides the Steel one. The blonde asked Steel if she knew this fiery fiend, but to her surprise, Steel also saw this creature for the first time. The fire one did not waste time while everyone was thinking about his person. He pushed off with force and pounced on the Steel one, trying to pierce the latter with his thin limbs. The fiend crashed into Steel, but did not cause him much harm. The two monsters grabbed each other, but in the end, Fiery was on top, trying to bite through Steel's neck and head with its jaws. Steel grabbed the fiend's paws with his hands, kicked the monster away from him, sealing Fire One into a nearby machine, creating a crater at the point of contact between Fire One and the machine. While two symbols of destruction were trying to destroy each other, Brandon decided to take advantage of the moment and escape from this dangerous place, quickly informing his friends about it. Patrick sobbed with resentment towards the monsters. Their fight destroyed the car in which all the food and supplies were located. For a moment, he even forgot about the danger of their situation. Brandon's scream quickly brought him down to the ground. He shouted to his friend that they could find supplies later, as well as transport. Now they needed to find a safe shelter. Friends, Vanessa, Patrick, and Brandon rushed from their seats down the street. They were surrounded by people just like them, trying to find shelter away from this horror. But Jessica was not going to let them go so easily. The blonde drew the attention of the monsters to the escape of their targets. The most important of all was Brandon, who had the necessary information. But the steel monster did not help her. He was still tied up in battle with the fire one. But the fiend spat at those running away like a fiery clot. Quickly approaching the girl with a pink rabbit backpack, Vanessa could already imagine the pain from the blow. The shockwave from the blow splashed across the classmates running ahead of their friends, and a small shadow could be discerned in the column of rising flame. The fiery blow flew past the girl and grabbed the tree, the flame instantly spreading along its entire length. The force of the impact knocked down a tree, which, falling right across the road, blocked the friends from the rest of their classmates with a wall of fire. The classmates hesitated, but Brandon quickly brought them to their senses with a shout. He ordered them to run away from here quickly and find shelter. Patrick was overcome with fear. He did not understand what to do and where to run. In a panic, he turned to Brandon for advice. The swordsman looked around and noticed the entrance to the underground parking. The place was not the best and was closer than desired, but nevertheless safer, as if they had remained in place. Brandon quickly notified his friends of the discovery, and they rushed into the safety of the underground walls of the parking lot, nearly colliding with cars and stumbling. The battle was in full swing. The monsters, like hungry lions skirting the borders of their cage, circled in front of each other and grinned, while no one had yet suffered from the conflict. But no one had emerged victorious. It seemed that the fiend was devoid of any kind of intelligence and reason, however. Steele decided to gain luck and tried to reason with the fiery one, offering to first simply talk and conclude a truce. Despite their contentious first meeting, Full Metal inquired about Fire's appearance, asking him if he, like him, had appeared by eating a piece of black metal. It seemed that the eyes of the fiery one were looking into the past. The steel one voiced something familiar. Incomprehensible sounds were heard from the fiend's mouth. The steel one could only understand the word about black metal. The fiery body began to beat in place in wild convulsions. It wriggled, as if it felt the heat of the fiend emitted by the flame on the body. It grabbed its head. Fragments of memories flashed before the fiery one. It grabbed its head, torn from pain. He remembered himself, undressed and tied to a bed, as well as a naked man bending over him, forcing him to swallow a particle of black metal. These rich psychos did terrible things to him, the memories of which brought pain and suffering. The fiery one remembered everything, all the pain, all the fear and despair. The monster knelt down and spewed fiery flames into the sky, angrily vowing to take revenge and destroy everyone who made him suffer. Steele looked at all this with silent sadness. He wanted to console this power user. He assured that he understood everything that Fire felt. He also ate black metal. They could help each other. They had no need to be at enmity. Jessica did not share Steele's feelings. She irritably asked him how long they would spend their precious time here, when Brandon was running further and further with every second, and the chance of catching him by surprise again was extremely low. She asked if Steele really wanted to bleed Brandon, because the opportunity to do this was fading with every second of delay in the heat of battle. They did not even notice where he had disappeared, but Steele calmed her down, assuring her that he was able to track this group by smell, which meant that all was not lost. Fiery listened to their dialogue with curiosity. Having shed its initial rage from the fight, the fire monster became curious about the person that Jessica and the steel monster wanted to find, who explained to the fire monster that the guy they wanted to find was capable of reversing their monstrous metamorphoses. Fiery instantly became aroused. The hope of returning to his human form flared in his loins, and he decided to help them find the guy, breathless. Brandon, Vanessa, and Patrick were already drenched in sweat as they ran through the underground parking lot, and although it seemed like they had managed to escape from the monsters, the quiet street was deceptively calm. Literally a moment later, a white foreign car, a meter away, landed with a roar on a group of friends, scaring them to death. The steel monster threw its arms to the sides, blocking the path further. It noted that Brandon, in his naivety, believed that their duel was over. The monster arrogantly demanded from Brandon all the available information regarding the energetic black metal, the culprit of their metamorphoses, before Steele kills Brandon, and warning the man that the guy should tell the truth. Brandon was irritated and angry by the monster's bloodthirstiness. and pomposity. He was not one of those people who cried when his life was threatened. Today, not a single grain of information would come out of his mouth. But the threat to the lives of his friends required quick action from him. Brandon ordered Patrick to take Vanessa to a safe place, while he himself would tie the monster up in battle, buying time for his friends. As soon as they took a couple of steps, the backside of the parking lot was blocked by another creature, shrouded in flames, as if it had just escaped from the devil's zoo. The fire monster bared its teeth, and Patrick stepped back, saying that they were surrounded and could not get out of here so easily. Jessica reveled in the superiority of the picture before her. She noted that in their position they would not be able to hide from her, certainly not with two monsters at hand. Brandon did not want to involve his friends in the conflict and shouted that they should not approach him or interfere in the conflict, hiding on the shore. Steele ran out of patience, and with a growl and incredible force he pushed off from his place, rapidly closing the distance to Brandon and bringing his paws forward for a fatal blow. Brandon was an experienced warrior. He read the movements of his enemy, and his honed senses allowed him to dodge the blow backwards. While dodging, he managed to pull out a pistol with a jerk, and although his position did not promise him enough opportunity to aim, he squeezed the trigger. The bullet hit Jessica in the area of her right collarbone. The place where the bullet made its way turned scarlet, and there was a hole on the right side of her shoulder. Steele instantly froze in place. He did not have time to understand what had happened. Turning his head, he only managed to notice Jessica's screaming and falling body. Steele didn't have time to put his thoughts in order when Brandon's gun again showered Jessica with a wave of bullets. Steele didn't have time to cover his partner, and the bullets again riddled the girl. The steel monster opened up, which Brandon instantly took advantage of, raising his blade to strike the confused monster. A roar coming from behind the guy forced Brandon to turn around in time, because the fiery fiend, opening its mouth and arms, jumped, about to attack the guy with a roar. Having made a somersault, Brandon dodged the throw, but the fiend, with its mouth wide open, threw out a stream of flame directly at the guy. Brandon held back the fiery whirlwind with his blade, which cut the flow of flame to the sides, but such protection very tired the swordsman. Hiding behind the column, Vanessa was amazed by Brandon's strength, but she was not going to hide behind the column so easily. The column was behind the fiend, and she took out a tomahawk from the hem of her dress, which she threw at the fire monster with all her remaining strength. The blow landed right on the monster's skull, but the thin monster turned out to be stronger than it looked, and nevertheless, the deadly stream of flame stopped, and the fiend turned its attention to the girl. Patrick ran up to Vanessa to take her away, but the monster had already turned his fiery body towards them, opening his mouth wide. But the second respite was enough for Brandon to strike from a distance. He sent a green wave, cutting everything in its path towards the fiend, but the blow hit the pipe above the monster. From the dissected pipe above the fire monster, water poured straight down in a stream, rolling up the fiend and leveling the flames of the monster's body. Brandon instantly approached the frozen monster. Now he was not constrained by the monster's hot flame, and making a slashing blow, the monster's paw crashed onto the concrete. Now that the fire monster was no longer a threat, Brandon turned all his attention to the steel monster, who gently held the wounded Jessica close to him with his paws. The face of the steel one angrily turned to the guy. The monster promised that very soon Brandon would pay for everything, if only he would be patient. The steel monster and the fiery fiend galloped into the darkness of the tunnel, leaving the scene of the recent skirmish with a roar. Brandon fell to the floor with his knees, plunging his sword into him. This fight tired him very much, but the cries of a worried Vanessa were already rapidly approaching him. Brandon looked exhausted, but Vanessa calmed down a little when, having specified the wounds received in the battle, the swordsman denied any presence of them. He was unharmed. The guy still hadn't left the fight, because meeting two users was already a rarity, and the fact that they were still alive was pleasant to Brandon. Patrick noticed that Brandon used the word not monster, but user the swordsman knew much more, maybe even these two users, but was in no hurry to share information. But Brandon relaxed and plunged into explanations, saying that the users were former people who consumed the energetic black metal. He emphasized that in most cases, after this, people simply turn into zombies, but some have a chance to merge with metal and gain greater strength and abilities. The monsters they met today were even rarer specimens, for they managed to retain their intelligence and sound train of thought. During the entire story, Patrick did not lose his mask of surprise and misunderstanding. After the end of the story, Patrick asked where Brandon had all this information. But the guy, as always, showed mystery. Now was not the time or place to dive into these explanations, because it would become an even longer story. They were already heading out of the unfortunate parking lot, accompanied by a little whining from Patrick about property damage during this fight. But Brandon kept thinking about what had happened. He came to the conclusion that their world had finally changed. It was no longer the same as before, and the apocalypse was increasingly affecting their world. The hours of weakness were over. It was time to do something about it. He had to be strong and stand in the way of all the madness that had collapsed on their world. They were soaked through from the torrential downpour, wanting to find transport. Patrick cursed when the next car they were looking for was unusable. But nevertheless, everything is not so bad, because in the cars they met, there were supplies and resources. Patrick was just taking a bag of supplies out of the car, when only now the whole picture of the destruction was revealed to him. There were fragments of foreign cars everywhere. The greatest concentration of them was at the exit from the underground parking, where there were indeed intact and working examples, which, unfortunately, they could not use due to the blockage. The downpour was getting stronger, and Patrick found a couple of raincoats, which, by the way, did not really help from the water. Patrick offered to take shelter from the rain, after which they could continue searching for transport. Brandon was considering this proposal when his gaze fell on Vanessa. The girl's eyes strangely clung to her surroundings, and her mouth narrowed into a strip. The guy asked the reasons for this behavior. Vanessa replied that she had been here in the past. She remembered that her father's old friend must be somewhere nearby. The girl offered to go with her, said that she would have to walk not far, towards the mountains, and showed the direction with her hand. She said that she knew Dad's friend and that he was a good person, although a little strange, and that he has a big house with high walls that zombies can't get through and many, many computers. The fat man was surprised that there were a lot of computers, but noticed that the supermarket would be more useful to them. They asked the girl to show the way and suggested that her dad might be there. But then zombies appeared on their way, standing like a wall in front of them, and their sophisticated jaws were very close. The road turned out to be blocked, and now the guys will have to advance in battle. But they still had no idea how to do this. But then some monster blew off the head of the nearest zombie. Splashes of stinking flesh scattered in all directions, and then with 2 fingers she pulled out a ball from the remains lying on the ground and squeezed it tightly in her fist. The monster said that this black gold should be enough, and his eyes flashed, and then he jumped in one leap to the house nearby. At that time, there was a fire monster in the house, and its face was not inferior in ugliness to the monster. The monster flew into his window with one swing. Squeezing a ball in his fist, the monster moved towards him, and nearby in the next room, on the bed lay the golden-haired girl Jessica, dying from her wounds, moaning in pain. The monster exclaimed that he had brought black gold to the girl and handed her his precious burden. Jessica asked to give her everything she had because her condition was getting worse every minute. The monster doubted that Jessica would be able to eat it all, because even one ball was enough for the changes to become irreversible. The girl shouted for it to give her all the black gold and left. She was in a fever. Her eyes were shining. And I shout to you again. Don't forget to share your impressions in the comments. Have a nice day, dear YouTube viewer. The monster again went to the fire monster to ask him what to do now. The fire monster asked if she had eaten everything, and the monster replied that she doubted it. The fire monster sadly said that he saw others being forced to eat these black pearls, and the consequences were terrible. He did not die, but became like this. The beast said that he didn't want Jessica to die because it would be very bad for all of them. The fire monster said that he had cauterized her wounds, but without special treatment, she would die, and she simply needed black gold. The monster drooped. It seems that Jessica has no choice but to eat the black gold. The fire monster was full of hope and said that it would be nice if she endured the mutation and became like them. After all, then there is no need to be afraid of anyone. She will become the same monster as they are, and no zombies will be afraid of her. You can kill whoever you want and take revenge for everything that happened to them and to many other people. But the monster objected that people like Brandon remained and showed his hands, which did not regenerate after being hit by that guy. The fire monster replied that Brandon is strong, and his weapons are capable of knocking down his flames, so it will not be easy with him. They decided to torture him in order to find out the secret of black gold and regain their human appearance, because they no longer saw any other way. The fire monster said that his name was Bo, and looked sadly at his fellow sufferer. The monster replied that his name was Shen, and that he also wanted to become human again, but not be afraid of zombies. At this time, the young man cut the zombie in half with his sparkling green sword, and pieces of flesh fell in a heap to the ground. The fat man asked the young man if he was okay because he was terribly pale, and suggested that they first find a place where they could rest. He said he was fine and asked Vanessa how far it was to her father's friend's house because it wasn't safe to stay there. The girl said that they need to go through the tunnel, climb the mountain, and they will be there. But the tunnel turned out to be full of water, due to the fact that the drainage system was clogged, and there was so much water that one could simply drown. But there were wooden boards there, and the guys invited Vanessa to sit on them, and they would push her. They went down into the tunnel and began their advance towards the friend of the girl's father, pushing in front of them the boards on which the girl was sitting. Patrick was trembling, he was dark and scared, and he kept asking if zombies could dive, but no one answered him. The girl only said that we needed to walk a little further, although it was difficult to see it in the pitch darkness. Her face looked especially pale against the darkness of the tunnel, but she didn't look too scared. Suddenly, the young man's legs began to sink into some viscous substance, and he fell deeper and deeper. He tried to grab onto something with his hands, but soon he almost completely fell through somewhere. Meanwhile, the monsters noticed that the rain did not stop and the water was not going anywhere. Shen decided to discuss the situation with Jessica and went to her room. He was very worried. The girl sat huddled on the floor. Her head hung limply. She covered her face with her hand. And when she looked at Shen, she looked terrible. Thick cords of blood vessels appeared on her face, and all over her body it seemed that she began to mutate. Bo, left alone, became nervous. He could not understand what was happening because everything was not as usual. The entire building was shrouded in purple flashes, which were especially bright in the dark. Meanwhile, Brandon found himself next to some girl standing with two guards, who asked him where his fellow mechanic was hiding. He spat and told her, the stinking bitch, to stay away from him, because otherwise he wouldn't vouch for himself. And then the main character felt that his hand could not grab hold of anything and fell into the darkness. He woke up in some unfamiliar place, reminiscent of a hospital. The guy was lying on the bed and could not understand what was happening. He tried to stand up and felt dizzy and groaned at how weak he was. Then Vanessa ran up to his bed, who was very happy that he had come to his senses, despite the fact that he still looked very exhausted. The girl said that they were at her dad's friend's house and that they were now completely safe. The fat man also came, who brought Brandon food and reported that he had been unconscious for a whole day. He was offended that the schoolboy was not too happy with them and said that they dragged him with all their might. Brandon doubted it, because there was such a strong wind and rain, and it would be difficult for them to drag him here in such weather. A friend of Vanessa's dad entered the room, who also said that he did not understand how they got to him. He said it was difficult for him to imagine how the student, the fat man, and the girl could get past the zombies. Vanessa exclaimed that Grandpa Henry already saw everything, because everything was before his eyes, and he himself could answer his own question. And she said that when Brandon lost consciousness, she and the fat man didn't know what to do. They were completely at a loss, and if not for the video surveillance system, they would have had a hard time, because a horde of zombies was roaming nearby, and the guys were in danger. Grandfather Henry saw them, recognized Vanessa, and took them because the girl was the daughter of his friend, and he could not leave her in such a situation. The girl said that thanks to her grandfather, they were able to get here, and smiled. She was glad that everything ended this way. Brandon hesitantly asked his grandfather if he had seen everything, and narrowed his eyes. He did not yet know how to feel about his grandfather. And he replied that it was hard not to see how Brandon chopped up these zombies as if he were chopping vegetables, and asked what kind of weapon he had. The main character thanked Grandpa Henry for saving him, but replied that it was difficult for him to say anything about the weapon, and that he needed it back as soon as possible. He felt bad again, and Vanessa exclaimed for her brother to take care of himself. Brandon felt that swinging the sword had taken a lot of his strength and fell to his knees. Grandpa Henry said that he forgot to introduce himself and squinted, his white beard moving funny. It turned out that you can just call him Dr. Henry, and that his research institute is located here. Then Brandon remembered that Dr. Henry was a famous scientist who studied zombies and gave the name to energy black gold. He remembered how for the mechanic the doctor was like a sage sent down, and here he was next to him. The guy asked the doctor if his name was really Henry and gave him an incredulous look. Grandfather laughed and said that he awarded this doctorate degree to himself, and in general, he only works part-time at this institute. However, the doctor's interest in weapons is very real, and Henry asked the schoolboy to give him the opportunity to study them for the sake of the future of humanity. And Brandon agreed, especially since perhaps these are not just similar names, and the doctor is really that same famous scientist. However, the guy said that he had something better, folded his arms and smiled. Seeing the questioning expression on the doctor's face, he replied that he could provide a live zombie. The doctor led the main character to the room where the weapons were kept. Vanessa and Patrick followed them along the corridor. He said he only scanned the weapon and found something interesting but didn't touch anything else. The doctor was surprised at how easily Brandon picked up the weapon, even though he himself had difficulty bringing it here. The guy looked around and noted with respect that the doctor's working conditions were very good. If you use all the equipment that is here, you can create even more powerful weapons. Dr. Henry was surprised and asked if the schoolboy really created it, and he confirmed. The doctor lit up. He really wanted to know how it happened. He was full of curiosity. But Brandon said that the process of creating the weapon would remain a secret. Otherwise, he would not catch zombies for research. At this time, on the computer screen, the fat man said that if they give him something tasty, he will think about it. And then he said that a man named Brandon, an 18-year-old high school student, third year of study, Class A, and Patrick could not be found. Vanessa sat in front of the control panel, tapping her fingers on the keyboard and watching what was happening outside the window. Dr. Henry walked into the room with 2 cups in his hands and called the girl by name. He complimented her on her efforts to find survivors outside and offered her some tea. The doctor said that he was sorry that her father had not yet been found, because the CCTV camera only covered the coastal area, and it was still infested with zombies. The girl took a sip from her mug and said that Henry was very good, and that she was sure that everything would be all right with his father. Grandfather laughed, but noted that he was not sure that everything was all right with the 2 who came with her. After all, that student does not seem like an ordinary person, since he managed to master high technology at such a young age. Dr. Henry noticed that the student also had an evil look, which only murderers have. Then an indignant fat man came into the room and yelled that it was forbidden to discuss people behind their backs. The old man was telling the girl that he didn't trust the fat man, and he seemed suspicious when behind his back the fat man with a pack of chips did not swear at the old man for gossiping. Patrick, wearing yellow glasses, pointed his finger at the old man and told him that the old man was suspicious because he was alone in a huge laboratory. On the roof of the building there was a helipad, all flooded with water from the rain, and below there was a large park with a bunch of cars, and there were also long rows with fuel tanks nearby. The fat man said that in the laboratory there were also huge compartments with clothes, food, and other things. The grandfather listened with a cup in his hands, and a girl with 2 tails sat on a chair next to him. But the grandfather could not stand the accusations. He shouted at the fat man that he understood absolutely nothing and did not know what he was doing here. The old man pointed his finger at the fat man. He was angry and shouted that he foresaw the day of judgment in advance and prepared himself, while the others thought he was crazy. Henry continued to shout about how they all live in his laboratory, eat his food, and continue to blame him for something. The old man considered them ungrateful. The fat man shouted that he did not believe that the old man was saving all of humanity, since he had placed cameras throughout the coastal area. But the old man replied that only thanks to these cameras he managed to save them all. The girl tried to calm them down. While they were shouting, suddenly someone came up to the fat man and stuck something in his neck. Patrick turned around and looked at the young man. The fat man was outraged. Brandon ordered him not to move and injected a dose of blood into the test tube. The fat man turned and asked the guy why he injected him in the neck, to which the young man replied that he needed to take a portion of blood. The main character answered that the first wave of zombie mutation will begin very soon, and they need to prepare, since there is little time left. The young man turned his back on the old man and the fat man, and as he left, he told them that even greater trials and troubles awaited them. It was pouring rain outside. All the streets were flooded. A crowd of zombies was walking waist-deep in water, and the guy watched all this in horror. The blonde squatted down. He turned to his classmates and told them the sad news that they were surrounded on all sides by zombies, and there was nowhere to run. The brunette said that, as luck would have it, all the roads around were flooded because it was raining. The girl next to him covered her face with her hands and cried, because she did not understand what to do next. Next to them sat a classmate who was crying over the girl lying on the floor. The brunette was lying on the cold floor and was covered with a dirty sheet. The blonde remembered his lost classmate. His classmates were panicking next to him, thinking that they would die in this building due to lack of food. But the blonde objected to them that there was something else, and showed small green balls on his palm. His classmates wondered what they were. He said that when he helped Brandon fight zombies, he hid a few balls for himself. Since he saw how one person ate such a ball and turned into a monster, the blonde thought that maybe he should do the same. His classmates were shocked they asked him not to do this, because it meant that he would take his own life. Feng nervously clutched the green balls in his hands. He reasoned that if they had the strength, they would be able to break through the zombies, and everyone would be saved. While they were discussing this idea, one of their classmates pointed somewhere in the direction where something strange was happening. Next to them, a black and purple tornado rose on the roof of a building. Lightning circled next to this tornado. The guys were frozen in amazement and horror. They looked at this miracle of nature and thought that a tornado would soon hit the city. Meanwhile, in the laboratory, Brandon was cooking the details of some invention. He was so engrossed that he did not notice anything around him. He didn't even notice how the fat man was watching him work, but he didn't know what the young man was doing. At this time, an old man in orange clothes approached the fat man and said that the guy was working on new equipment that could withstand the attack of mutated zombies. The young man thought that all the zombies would become black-thorned and fire-breathing because they had already met on their way. The fat man said that then they would all be finished. They again began to argue about the fact that there were no weapons in the old man's laboratory. The old man objected that this was a scientific center, not a fortress, and Patrick said that they needed to defend themselves with something. While they were arguing, a girl ran up to them, screaming and calling for Grandpa Henry. The men immediately turned to the baby. All this time, she watched the coast through cameras, and in one of them, she saw her father. Patrick asked Vanessa if she was sure of this, and the old man was surprised that the girl's father had reached the coastal area. All together, they ran to the cameras to check the girl's words. Running into a room with many cameras, the girl began to show the place where she saw her father just in case. She saved the recording to show the men. On the recording, they saw a crowd of zombies walking through the streets, but among them was a middle-aged man in a raincoat, and the zombies did not seem to notice him. Vanessa watched what was happening in awe until the men understood why the girl's father was not attacked by zombies. The man was in a blue cloak, and there was some kind of algae on his head. The girl looked at the screen with tears in her eyes. She called the man Daddy and watched as at some point her father turned towards a street. Patrick tried to cheer up the girl. Now they know that the girl's father is alive and well, and even knows some way to hide from zombies. Vanessa smiled at the fat man and wiped away her tears. Henry took a closer look at the man and suggested that the girl's father hung himself with the remains of zombies and also smeared himself with their blood. This is what allowed him to be unnoticed among the zombies, and probably the zombie is guided by smell when attacking. This is an interesting question that was worth studying. While the old man was talking out loud, Vanessa was very worried and looked at her grandfather with fear when he saw this. He apologized for his words. The old man began to tell the girl that he understood her desire to save her father, but it was raining heavily outside, and the tunnel that leads to the city was flooded. These words made Vanessa sad, lowered her head, and was ready to cry. When Patrick suggested that the girl ask her brother Brandon, maybe he already has equipment with which they can save the girl's father. When Vanessa approached Brandon to ask about this, he answered unequivocally, no, since he was not finished with his invention yet. He believed that there was no need to rush into it. Brandon said that he asked not to distract him from an important task, only to bring him food. Vanessa stood upset, with her hands down. Patrick rushed to the girl's aid. He shouted to the main character that he was ruthless and heartless, and could at least sympathize with the girl. Brandon displeasedly answered the fat man that since he was so smart, he should help Vanessa himself. Patrick sighed nervously, as he did not expect such a question from a schoolboy, but he immediately saw the weapon that Brandon was making in his laboratory. It was an improved knife and pistol. The fat man ran up to the weapon with admiration and asked Brandon that his blood was in this weapon, which allowed him to use it on zombies. Patrick grabbed the sword with admiration, raised it above his head, and noted its lightness and strength. Brandon taught the fat man how to use a weapon. When you swing a weapon, you need to control the degree of impact. Otherwise, the attack will be ineffective against zombies, and the fat man risks wasting all his strength. Patrick beamed with joy. He lovingly clutched his new sword and promised the hero to take into account all his comments. Next, Patrick picked up the pistol that Brandon had remade. The guy continued to instruct. In order to shoot, It is necessary to turn on the power source since only thanks to energy does a shot occur, and it is also worth considering that there is a lot of power, but bullets are limited. Patrick even licked his lips with impatience. He looked at the weapon with adoration, but Brandon warned him that he needed to aim and not waste bullets. The fat man was so inspired that he immediately grabbed all the weapons and ran to train, forgetting that a girl had come with him, who was expecting help from him. Patrick eagerly ran out into the street where it was raining. The fat man held a weapon in his hands and headed towards the exit. He exerted all his strength, and with a loud shot, he launched the gun into the sky. A sound was heard from all sides, and a green pillar of light burst into the sky. The fat man laughed. Now he considered himself unique and invincible. The rain completely wet him, but he did not seem to notice it. Now it was the turn of the sword. Patrick took it more comfortably in his hand and swung it. Green sparks flew from all sides. The sword could easily cut through any object. An old man looked at all this through the screen, who was once again angry with Patrick. The old man shouted that the fat man should not wave a weapon in front of the laboratory. The fat man was in such ecstasy that he continued to scream and rejoice and call himself invincible. Patrick changed his clothes. He put on an orange raincoat and rubber boots. He had a weapon in both hands, and he was not afraid to use them. The old man and Vanessa looked at the screen behind the fat man. Apparently, he was about to go to the aid of the girl's father and bring him to them. The girl was very worried about Patrick. He asked the girl if everything would be all right with the fat man, but the old man was absolutely not worried about him. Patrick put an earphone in his ear and checked the connection. A raincoat protected him from the rain. The road to the city was flooded, so Patrick will have to go around the mountains, where there are no cameras and a lot of zombies, so Patrick needs to be as careful as possible. Even under these conditions, the old man and the fat man continued to swear and call each other names, the fat man asking the old man to hand over control to Vanessa. A lone figure in an orange raincoat walked in the darkness with a weapon in his hands, until he encountered a huge number of evil zombies. The zombies sensed prey and ran towards the fat man, who gathered all his strength into a fist and hoped to deal with them with the help of a new weapon. First, the fat man decided to use the sword. A green trail was left by the blow from his powerful sword, which cut through the air. The zombies literally fell apart from just one blow. The fat man was inspired and happy with his strength. He called the zombies to attack faster, until the fat man's gaze turned towards the forest, and he saw something terrible. A huge black and purple tornado that was heading towards the laboratory with thunder and strong winds. While Patrick was fighting off the zombies, he tried to call the old man and Vanessa, as he had to warn about the new danger. The rain was getting stronger, and a lucky tornado was heading towards the fat man, ready to destroy everything in its path. The old man and Vanessa watched what was happening on cameras. The instruments showed that nothing good could be expected from the weather. They ordered the fat man to return before it was too late. The fat man was very upset. He told Vanessa that he was very sorry, but until the weather changed, he would not be able to return the girl's father. Grandfather reassured Vanessa that if her father could survive from zombies, then he would be able to hide from bad weather. The girl could only agree with the old man. At this time, the fat man had already approached the gates of the laboratory. The rain was getting stronger. At that moment, a red alarm loomed in the laboratory itself. The old man became very frightened and began to look for the cause of this phenomenon. The old man saw on the screen that a zombie had been following Patrick all this time. The old man was trying to warn the fat man. Patrick went out the gate and began to tell the old man that he had already dealt with the zombies and dragged one into the laboratory. Brandon asked Patrick to bring one of the zombies alive to the laboratory for some of his experiments in Patrick's hands. The zombie's eyes glowed with madness. Henry was angry. He yelled at Patrick. How dare he bring a living zombie to them? The old man ordered Vanessa to stay safe, and he ran as fast as he could to Patrick. When he reached the fat man, he had already thrown the remains of the zombie onto the floor and was waiting for the old man. Patrick told the old man that for safety he cut off the zombie's arms and legs. The old man was amazed that despite this, the zombie continued to try to get to them. Vanessa watched from a safe place as the fat man and the old man communicated in a friendly manner, the old man thanking Patrick for such a gift. Vanessa was glad that the old man and Patrick found a common language and became friends. At this time, Brandon was putting various inventions on his hand in his laboratory and did not even suspect what was happening outside. Meanwhile, the weather suddenly improved, the rain stopped, and the crowd of zombies looked at the light and began to transform into something more terrible. Some kind of monster began to crawl out of the zombies' faces and tore them into pieces. All their bodies and remnants of clothing were torn to pieces. and some monsters burst out with menacing red eyes. Now they looked like vile red creatures with superhuman strength and ability, able to cover long distances and develop speed and jumps. The little boy went out onto the balcony to look at the sun. He did not know about the new danger that awaited him. At that moment, a monster ran onto the balcony in one fell swoop, covering the sun with its body and frightening the boy very much. The father heard about the strange sound and rushed to his son's aid, shouting to his wife. But the monster had already entered the apartment and was holding the corpses of a woman and a child in both hands. The man was frozen in a nightmare. Monsters learned to climb multi-story buildings where people used to feel safe. But now these monsters were crawling around the building like cockroaches. The monster climbed onto one of the floors and broke the window. 3 men stood in horror in front of it. They screamed in fear and tried to run away. Brandon's former classmates also tried to escape from these monsters. They rushed as fast as they could to a safe place, hoping to escape. When the monster had almost grabbed the girl, an even more terrible monster stood in his way. Completely white, with unusual hands, it grabbed him and tore him into pieces. The white monster pulled out a small red ball from the red one, which remained in his hand. At this time, the rescued school children watched this. They still did not believe that they had been saved and recognized in this white monster their former classmate who ate green balls for them. A blonde sat on the roof of a tall building. She watched as a whole crowd of zombies moved harmoniously around the city. On both sides of her stood even more terrible monsters who were her subordinates. The armless fire monster looked in admiration at the zombies and how they moved under Jessica's leadership. A purple flame shone on the blonde's hand. She told the fire monster that this was the result of her many days of work. She was interested in where Brandon was. The gray monster replied that he had already found out the location of Brandon, who was in the mountains, in a research institute. The monster was ready to get there himself and destroy the guy. But Jessica objected to the monster that this would not do, and she would deal with it herself, her violet eyes shining with rage. She raised her hand above her head. The purple energy shone brightly. The girl said that she would tear Brandon apart with her own hands, as this was the only way she could quench her thirst for revenge. At this time, Patrick and Vanessa were going to search for the girl's father, when suddenly an alarm sounded. The fat man immediately called his grandfather and decided to find out from him what the reason was. The old man replied that they should immediately return back to the laboratory, as a huge crowd of zombies was approaching them. The cameras on the screen showed that zombies were approaching in large numbers towards the laboratory. Patrick and the girl ran as fast as they could back to the laboratory and asked the old man what exact scale of disaster awaited them. The old man answered Patrick over the communication that perhaps thousands and thousands of zombies were coming towards them. The fat man was shocked. The fat man wondered why this happened, why they were all going towards them. Were they the only survivors? Or had they offended someone? The old man replied that he didn't know what the reason was, and perhaps it was worth asking Brandon if they were ready for such a danger. The fat man immediately ran to the guy. Patrick knocked on Brandon's door and shouted that they had an emergency, that a crowd of thousands of zombies was coming towards them. Brandon was sitting at the computer and looking at something on the screen. He answered Patrick that he was aware of the situation. The old man had just told him about this news. Patrick cheerfully asked the guy if he was ready for such an invasion, if he had a plan, and if the guy was ready to destroy them all. But at the same time, Patrick was very nervous. Brandon continued to do something on the computer and told Patrick that he was not yet ready for such an event. Patrick was dumbfounded and angry. He asked Brandon if he really planned for Patrick to fight a crowd of zombies alone. Brandon sat calmly surrounded by a pile of wires and looked at the laptop screen. He calmly told Patrick that he warned them about the danger. The only thing is that events were developing faster than he expected. Brandon said that in this situation they must act together and rely on the old man. Patrick was angry. He shouted furiously that they did not have time to come up with something and needed to act now. But Brandon didn't answer Patrick. He got even more angry and walked away from Brandon's room and decided that in difficult situations it's worth always relying on yourself. The fat man climbed up to the roof along long spiral staircases. Patrick climbed onto the roof and began to watch from afar as a crowd of zombies was approaching their laboratory faster and faster. The fat man was dumbfounded that there were simply impossible many zombies, and that the walls of the laboratory would sooner or later collapse. Unable to withstand such pressure from the dead, Patrick decided that at any cost, they could not be allowed to reach the walls of the laboratory. He ran towards the blue car and was already jumping into the driver's seat. At this time, an old man and a girl were watching the fat man on the monitor screen. They called Patrick and asked where he was going. Patrick, already driving, told them that he wanted to try to stop the crowd of monsters. He asked them to open the gate and think for the old man how to save them all. And if the fat man does not return, then the old man must figure out a way to save them all. Vanessa screamed at Patrick not to do such an act, but the doors to the laboratory had already opened, and the blue car drove towards a crowd of zombies. Patrick chuckled while driving. He promised the girl that he was not going to just give up and would show them all. Moreover, he had in his hands a weapon that Brandon had made for him, with the help of which Patrick was going to detain the monsters. The fat man opened the car window and pointed the gun at the crowd of zombies. A green light illuminated everything around and headed towards the zombies. Patrick chuckled. He saw a bunch of monsters just lying incinerated on the ground. He thought that he didn't even need to aim. The fat man sat in the car and extended his hand towards the zombies. He shouted that he would incinerate them all. At that moment, he was really cool. The blonde was watching all this action from above. She looked at this whole situation angrily. The wind blew her hair. Her violet eyes were directed towards Patrick and the zombies. There was a feeling that something bad was about to happen. The girl did not suspect that they would have such a powerful weapon, because this only complicates everything. Patrick continued to mercilessly destroy the monsters, but no matter how many of them he killed, they kept coming with new and new strength, rolling in like a wave. Patrick noticed out of the corner of his eye that some kind of fireball was rushing towards his car, which hit the car and turned it over. Patrick, overcoming obstacles, was barely able to get out of the burning car. A fiery monster came towards the fat man, which destroyed Patrick's car. The fat man cursed very hard, looking at the fire monster who dared to attack him on the sly when the fat man was busy with zombies. Patrick shouted to the monster that this time he was not afraid of him and fired a pistol in his direction, putting all his strength and anger into this shot. But the fire monster turned out to be more cunning and was able to bounce off the shot. And then he released a pillar of fire towards the fat man. Fortunately, he also had difficulty, but managed to dodge such a blow, after which a shootout began. As a result, the monster realized that he was losing and began to run away. The fat man raised a gun in the air and shouted towards the monster. Next to him, there was an overturned jeep that was burning. While the fat man was shouting at the fire monster, zombies began to approach him. Patrick focused on them in time. An old man and a girl watched this whole picture from the laboratory. The old man shouted for the fat man to come back, because if the zombies surrounded him, he would not be able to escape from this trap. Patrick accepted the advice and ran as fast as he could from the crowd of zombies. He himself already thought that all this was a big trap. But on Patrick's way, there was another one of Jessica's henchmen, who blocked his path to the laboratory and attacked the fat man. The gray monster was a real giant. Its sharp fangs could cut a person into pieces. Patrick barely dodged this deadly blow, but as soon as Patrick was on the ground, he took out a pistol and shot at the gray monster. While he dodged the weapon, Patrick managed to attack first. He took out his sword and attacked the monster's back with all his might, but he retreated, and the green shock wave went all into the ground. The monster was shocked by the strength and power of the fat man. The monster remembered his battle with Brandon and thought that he would definitely lose to the fat man in agility and agility. Patrick did not retreat. He attacked the gray monster from all sides. First, he shot at him from a cannon and then swung his sword, so that the monster had to step aside all the time. Patrick joyfully shouted that he was not afraid of monsters. Jessica watched the battle from the sidelines, clearly expressing dissatisfaction behind her. Her hand acquired increasingly frightening colors, and this meant that the fat man was in for trouble. When the monster fled, zombies began to move toward the fat man with accelerated force, and he took a sword in his hand to defend himself from them. Patrick couldn't understand why the zombies had suddenly become so active. Sweat was running down his face. Patrick had no choice but to fight with all his might, repelling the attacks of monsters over and over again, the green light from the sword and pistol sparkling all the time. At some point, Patrick realized that the zombies were too fast, and he did not have time to destroy them. He urgently needed to come up with a new plan of action, otherwise he would end. In the end, he couldn't think of anything better than to just run away, and a huge crowd of undead monsters chased after him, raising their hands up. But he could not run far, because at that moment zombies began to fall on him from the sky, blocking his path. The fat man could not understand how this could even happen. That is, he still had to fight off the crowd, but this time from the one that was flying at him from the sky from all sides. But when Patrick turned around, he saw that the gray monster had grabbed the zombies like little kittens and was throwing them at the fat man, as if he was shooting at Patrick with a slingshot. Patrick shot at the zombies that were flying at him from the sky and generally fought off the zombies from all sides. Patrick was very angry and tired. He started running as fast as he could and asked someone to help him cope with all these troubles. But while the zombies continued to attack him, one of the women fell right on Patrick and grabbed his leg. The fat man screamed and tried to shoot the zombie so that she would unhook from his leg. But the bullets ran out. Then I had to take a sword and cut off the zombie's head. Just a little more and Patrick would have lost his leg or would have turned into a zombie himself. The fat man lay down tiredly. He watched as the zombie held his leg, unable to harm him, but there were still monsters on his way who wanted his death. The fat man continued to lie and monsters ran and ran towards him. It seemed that Patrick no longer had a chance to get out of this situation alive. Then, lying on the ground, Patrick grabbed a pistol and shot at those zombies that got too close. Green sparks flew from all sides. But it seemed that this did not save the fat man himself, and there was a possibility of blowing himself up. Suddenly, the entire clearing was illuminated by a bright green beam. The crowd of zombies was instantly destroyed. Patrick was stunned by such a wave, and he lay down on the ground to protect himself. The gray monster looked at how quickly the green wave simply scattered zombies all over the area. When the smoke cleared, in front of them was a table of Brandon in an iron suit, who was easily destroying zombies one after another. The fat man was very happy about the boy. He exclaimed joyfully and was ready to run and hug the guy for salvation. In the laboratory, the old man and the girl also watched this whole battle and were no less happy than the fat man that Brandon had arrived in time. The fat man looked with admiration at Brandon's suit and asked the guy if this was really the deadly weapon that the guy had been working on for so long, because it was simply amazing. Brandon interrupted the fat man's admiring speech and warned him that the enemy was still nearby. The guy asked the fat man that if he has the strength to fight further, then let him clear the left side of the zombies, and he will take the right, because their main goal is to prevent the zombies from approaching the walls of the laboratory. The fat man happily confirmed that since he was no longer alone, he still had the strength to fight further. And the fat man continued to destroy the zombies, shooting at them from all sides, but more confidently. Brandon, in his special suit, also did not stand still and cleared the entire right side of zombies. Only green sparks flew from all sides. Patrick looked at Brandon and his suit with admiration, because he practically did not even have to make an effort to destroy the monsters. After such a large number of zombies killed, they had every chance to collect thousands of seeds from zombies, thereby increasing their power. The fat man in his heart hoped that Brandon would make such a suit for him too. This inspired him very much. Then he began to destroy his opponents with redoubled force and was very happy about it. Standing on a pillar, Jessica continually watched this entire battle. Her subordinates told her that the power that Brandon had was simply enormous, and they could not cope with it. Jessica was very angry. She looked at Brandon and told him that iron could not save his life, and sooner or later it would destroy him. The force of Brandon's blow was so high that zombies flew from all sides as if they were just leaves. The old man and the girl watched the battle. The old man thought that Brandon was wearing an exoskeleton, and it did not look like an invention of this time. He very much doubted that an ordinary 18-year-old guy could assemble such a thing from unnecessary parts. Vanessa answered the old man that in fact this weapon is made from peas that Brandon collects after destroying the zombies. The old man was very surprised. The old man began asking the girl questions about this, that these pearls looked like metal and were in the zombie's head. The old man could not understand why Brandon hid such an important fact from him, that in the brains of zombies there was a source for weapons against them. The old man asked the girl to stay here and watch the battle, while he himself ran to the laboratory in order to dissect the zombie that the fat man had recently brought in. At this time, Jessica did not even think of giving up. The wind blew her hair and clothes. A huge force rose around her, which she was going to direct against Brandon. Blinded by this power, hundreds and hundreds of zombies ran towards Brandon. They were not going to stop at anything. The fat man warned his friend that a crowd of zombies was heading here with redoubled force. Their invasion resembled an earthquake. Brandon shouted to the fat man that as many zombies come as you kill, and so that he should think less. A bunch of angry zombies took off and greedily attacked the main character. Gathering all his strength, Brandon threw away the angry zombies with a powerful blow. Smirking, Jessica ordered the zombies to tear Brandon to pieces. Some explosions began to occur in the crowd of attackers, and thus the number of zombies became smaller. During the battle, Brandon was surprised that there were zombies capable of self-destruction. The fire monster annoyedly said that the fight was like a battle between gods and they were unable to help here in any way. In response, the gray monster mentioned that Jessica ate 7 black gold beads and became what she is now. The gray monster told how her body was changing, constantly being torn apart, and that only a person truly strong in spirit could endure such torment, which is why her hatred of Brandon is so noticeable. The fire monster replied that thanks to the eaten black gold beads, she not only turned into a monster, but also became several times stronger than them. To which the gray monster said that he did not know by what principle this happens, but did not want to experience the torment that she had to endure. Maybe she was not at all the same person she was. Jessica stands next to the pillar, tensing her entire body to gain as much strength and energy as possible. The zombies explode and shatter into pieces near the stunned Brandon. Brandon directs all the generated power with his hand towards the tower where Jessica stands. The platform on which the girl stood is undermined and she flies off it. Having landed, an angry Jessica runs as fast as she can, increasingly blazing with her power. Brandon immediately directs the suit's hand in her direction, which also creates electrical discharges, trying to fend off the girl's attacks. Jessica turns a mob of zombies against Brandon while the guy tries to fight them off. With one powerful blow, Brandon gets rid of them, causing Jessica to fall flat on the ground. Another strong blast of energy is sent towards Jessica. It seems that her strength is leaving her, and she can no longer resist. The metal arm of Brandon's suit tightly grips the helpless girl, and she screams in pain. Brandon began to furiously interrogate Jessica, asking if she died from bullets that day and forcing her to answer how many pearls she ate. The hand of his former classmate began to glow more and more brightly with magic. Brandon, swinging the metal leg of the suit, began to press Jessica into the ground. The guy shouted loudly that in a past life he lost his hand because of her, and now it was time for her to pay for it. The gray monster decided to stand up for the girl and ran towards Brandon as fast as he could. The monster, frightened by the explosion of the guy's suit, rushed away. Then the monster attacked the guy, who in turn raised his iron hand where Jessica was and hit the monster's head with all his might. The fiery monster was horrified by the picture he saw, because his friend soared high above the ground under the influence of the unknown forces of the suit. The stunned monster shouted in shock that Brandon had killed Sean and even caught Jessica. He realized that the main character's combat mech was terrible. The monster thought that he still urgently needed to escape from here. The fur's powerful hand continued to hold Jessica tightly, causing the girl to sigh. Brandon continued to torment Jessica, asking if she was really so special that she ate black gold and was able to return to her human form, and at the same time claiming that her existence in itself was dangerous, and the infection needed to be uprooted immediately. The guy squeezed the girl even harder. She could no longer stand it and screamed in wild pain. The zombies did not like the guy's act. A crowd of them gathered next to him and also shouted something. Brandon was perplexed that the zombies had already begun the first stage of mutation. Out of panic, Vanessa began shouting to her brother that everything was bad. She claimed that there were more and more zombies around the research institute. The girl saw that brother Patrick was steadfastly holding the defense at the main gate, but zombies began to climb over the walls and enter the territory of the institute. Jessica sarcastically said that none of them would survive, and they would turn into zombies, becoming her slaves. Brandon threw Jessica into a crowd of hungry zombies. With 2 hands of a strong fur, the guy began to burn the zombies. The fat man was very nervous because his weapon was out of bullets. Patrick, interrupting the advancing zombies with his sword, yelled that everyone here was already surrounded by zombies. The furious zombie attacked the fat man, who grabbed the sword with both hands, trying to somehow brush off the attacker. Patrick was sweating profusely, perplexed that a new type of anomalous had appeared. He didn't understand why the light blade couldn't cut them instantly now. The fat man felt something was wrong. More and more zombies appeared around him. He rushed as fast as he could from the crowd of evil zombies, still wondering what kind of creatures these were, since the light blade did not cut them, but only slightly threw them away, and realizing that the first stage of mutation had begun. Vanessa tried to call the fat man, asking him over the connection if he was still okay. Several zombies climbed over the wall and entered the research institute. Dr. Henry is busy in the laboratory. He does not yet know about the situation outside. Over the connection, Patrick received an order to quickly return to the laboratory building, with which the fat man agreed, although after walking around him in a circle, he realized that zombies had completely surrounded the institute and he could not get inside. Brandon flew into the air and directed his fur arms towards Patrick, thereby grabbing him. The fat man was glad at this turn of events and asked if the guy could really take him on the flight. Serious Brandon did not agree that this was a flight. He was going to move the fat man to a research institute because it was on it to destroy the zombies that penetrate there. Having reached his destination, Brandon returned Patrick to Earth. Brandon reported that some zombies have already undergone the first stage of mutation, but despite the fact that their skin is tougher, they can still be destroyed by inflicting more blows, although they should not be underestimated because they are more agile than ordinary zombies. Patrick was already dead tired and wanted to finally sit down and catch his breath, but Brandon made it clear that while the zombies were outside, he wouldn't be able to rest. Brandon stood on the wall that surrounded the territory of the Institute, and the zombies immediately turned their attention to him. Pointing the furs at the zombies, Brandon again began to burn the crowd of zombies, keeping them away from the Institute. Patrick, sitting on the ground, asked to bring him water so as not to die of thirst, and did not even notice how zombies were climbing over the wall behind him. From the background noise, he realized that something was wrong and turned around and saw a zombie running towards him. Trying to defend himself from the attacks, the fat man plunged his light blade into the body of the zombie. Having cut through the zombie, the fat man stepped on its body, furiously pulling out the blade. Vanessa came outside to meet Patrick and brought out a bottle of water for him. After a small struggle, the fat man was finally able to sit down on the ground again, while Vanessa wondered if he was okay. The girl approached Patrick, who was rummaging through the insides of the zombie, saying that she saw this zombie on the cameras and he was different from the others. Having pulled out the black pearl, Patrick was glad to find it, especially since it was red. Dr. Henry in his laboratory examined the same pearl, which, although opaque in appearance, produced a dark greenish glow. Standing next to the experimental zombie, Henry admired the find, thinking that this black metal turns people into zombies. Or is it a polymer that is formed after turning into a zombie? He did not know how many more secrets were hidden in it. Brandon continued to fight the zombies, either squeezing them, stepping on them, or burning them. When he defeated them all, he calmed down and decided that the job was done. Being behind the wall, he shouted to the fat man that the zombies had been destroyed and he could go out and start collecting pearls. When Brandon returned to the fat man, Patrick praised him, saying that he could expect nothing else from his brother and nothing else. The efficiency was at its best, to which the guy replied that the fur had not yet been completed. Otherwise, it would have been more effective. The fat man decided to check the situation behind the wall, where the remains of the zombies looked like small hills, and he realized that he would spend an eternity collecting everything here. Inspired, Patrick asked Brandon if he would help him create battle armor as soon as he collected the pearls, but the only answer he received was that he needed to wait until the exhausted Brandon slept off. Dr. Henry appeared out of nowhere and wanted to ask something. The old man decided to ask Brandon when he would tell him about the secrets of black gold. Collecting pearls from dead zombies, Patrick was already sighing at how tired he was, and there were still thousands to deal with. However, he was glad that it was easier for him to work with charred bodies and easier to crack skulls, although it was sad to do it alone. At the Institute, Henry was interrogated by Brandon, wondering if it was true that black gold was the source of energy for zombies. Brandon confirmed this, saying that as soon as a person becomes infected with a zombie virus, such a black pearl is formed in his brain, and zombies are able to absorb sunlight thanks to an ability similar to photosynthesis, so they accumulate the required amount of energy in this black gold. Dr. Henry was very surprised by such information, reasoning that although pearls emit green light, he was unable to detect chlorophyll or the corresponding enzymes, but he found elements that he had never seen before. The old man became more serious. He said that the pearls consist of an active metal because when he used light illumination and heating, it caused a strong reaction in the pearls, and they also have a strong affinity for blood and metals. Brandon agreed with him that there are similarities especially to human blood. The guy said that the zombie virus spreads faster in the human body than in the bodies of animals or plants, and therefore it is easier for people to mutate into zombies. But after a certain period of time, they absorb light. They begin the first stage of mutation, Henry now understood why the zombies behaved very aggressively at night and lazily wandered around the streets during the day or generally stood still, because photosynthesis was a byproduct, and they accumulated energy for the first stage of mutation. But the doctor didn't understand why today the zombies were running around in the daylight like crazy. Brandon explained to him that this was all due to the fact that they were controlled by anomalies. The old man concluded that the anomalies were two creatures, one with black spikes and the other fire-breathing. But did they bring the zombies here? The guy said that these anomalies mutated after eating black gold, and they were controlled by a new super anomalous, who also happened to be his former head girl, Jessica. Dr. Henry wondered how the human body absorbs this metal, and if you eat black gold, you can mutate and get superpowers. It turns out that this is a transformation pill. To which Brandon replied that they also studied this aspect, and are sure that by eating black gold, the mutation is irreversible, and they tried to destroy the abnormal ones first, and as quickly as possible. Henry was already confused by so much information with anomalous and super anomalous, and he also did not understand if the zombies had mutated, then this was the first stage or already the second. He still didn't understand how Brandon knew everything this shouldn't be taught at his school. The guy decided that he would tell everything when the time came, but also believed that it would be more valuable if the old man studied everything on his own, to which he replied that Brandon had again piqued his interest. The doctor asked if he could study Brandon's weapon, and the tired guy told him that he would still use it, but Henry could do whatever he wanted with the weapon. Brandon asked not to disturb him while he was sleeping, and Dr. Henry, overjoyed, ran out of the room. Standing next to Brandon, Vanessa thought that she really wanted her brother to take her with him to look for Dad, but she understood that he was very tired from fighting all day. Vanessa stared gloomily with sad eyes at the floor. Her head was filled with thoughts. Too much had happened to her in the last days, and even white slippers with a pom-pom could not lift her spirit. Her golden eyes filled with moisture. She felt emptiness and loneliness inside her. Her thoughts constantly returned to her father, whom she missed so much. Sunset was approaching. When the exhausted Patrick collapsed to the ground and sprawled on it like a starfish on the seashore, he could no longer continue to dig. However, he was not very upset about his work. He was even happy to try for a common good cause. Besides, such work allowed him to lose excess weight. Fire watched him with curiosity. Although he was still not over the carnage that resulted in them burying the corpses of zombies, he consoled himself with the fact that it was all over. The fiend watched Patrick's work in the distance from behind the bushes. They had already defeated him and cut off his hand, finished off his acquaintances, but something still prevented him from surrendering to their mercy. He sadly came to the conclusion that he was a monster. They would not listen to him. They would not want to. As soon as he showed himself, his head would immediately separate from his body. The new subspecies of zombies, the red ones, were uncontrollable. They attacked him and almost tore him to pieces. He barely managed to escape from them. In that battle, he used up all his strength. Fiery understood that if ordinary zombies mutated into red ones, then he would have a hard time. He did not understand what to do in this case. He jumped forward from the bushes when his eyes noticed a figure in the trees. It was following his every step, was next to him, but he did not notice. It was a bearer of black metal, also having a humanoid figure and appearance. It most closely resembled a man. Although his marble skin gave him away with the blades on his hands, he hastily disappeared from view. The restroom was filled with the sounds of Patrick snoring. Vanessa was already having trouble sleeping, despite the soft and cozy sofa, but Patrick's snoring completely knocked the sleep out of her eyes. The sounds of work could be heard from the workshop. Brandon took off his windbreaker, remaining in a t-shirt, and worked on the mechanism, trying to complete the structure by morning. A dirty man in a blue cloak, in order to merge with the dead mass of zombies, finally reached the desired place. He did not come such a dangerous path for the sake of empty hands. An unknown man crawled into the store through the destroyed automatic doors. Well, he was here. All that remained was to find what he wanted, although the emptiness did not inspire hope. Approaching the cashier's counter, among the clouds of dust and a thick layer of dirt, he found a notebook with a single phrase: "His daughter is alive and has gone in search of him." The father's heart was constrained by pain from such a long separation. He did not know where to look for his Vanessa, but he could not be discouraged and lose hope. He had to find her. The father walked out of the store with a calm and even gait as a horde of zombies passed by. but his cloak and zombie manners reliably protected him from their bloodthirstiness. He calmly entered the flow of the horde and dissolved in it, became part of it and one whole. They had to lead him somewhere. He has time to think about finding his daughter. The sunbeams illuminated the walls and ceiling of the workshop. Consisting of lined steel, the metal greedily absorbed the sun. Brandon finally reaped the fruits of his labor. At the sight of this magnificence, Patrick's heart simply sank in his chest. His mouth opened in admiration, and his eyes could not get enough of the buggy. Although it is difficult to say what it is, reminiscent of Batman's cars, the transport was stronger than a tank. 4 huge wheels could drive over anything. Patrick eagerly drank his eyes into every inch of the car. Brandon's cold face was absorbed in his work. Patrick was torn with curiosity as to whether this transport was really made of the metal that Patrick had been digging up all day. But the best part is that this pearl will be driven by Patrick. Brandon remembered that his friend handled the robot poorly. The car was very powerful, made from many zombies of different subspecies. Patrick couldn't wait to look at the interior and try it out. His hands were just asking to grab the steering wheel and appreciate all the advantages of this thing. But Brandon said that this car handles the same as all the others, and you can try it out right away during their quick departure. Before Patrick had time to answer this, Vanessa appeared in front of the swordsman. In her hands was the same rabbit backpack. She also wanted to try to ride it. But Brandon quickly cooled her ardor. The area was swarming with new dangerous zombies of the first rank. He did not want to take risks and did not want to waste his time on her anymore. But the girl's face became serious. She had already been obediently locked up and waiting for several days, but her patience had run out. She wanted to find her father. Brandon became angry and threatened Vanessa that if she did not stop the showdown with him, he would ask the professor to lock her in the laboratory. The girl's eyes were already red from tears when she couldn't stand it and started sobbing again right in front of the guy, plaintively calling for her father. She couldn't wait any longer. Patrick, a witness to this scene, reproached Brandon for his behavior. He again brought Vanessa to tears, although he was not even her older brother. The professor, who appeared quite opportunely, was holding the repaired mechanism in his hands. His appearance calmed the situation, and the girl calmed down. The professor not only repaired the drone, he used a special metal from which the machine was made and greatly improved the battery life. The old man offered to install a drone on the car and use it to search and improve visibility, which he decided to provide to Vanessa, who could finally help them without risking herself. Brandon appreciated all the improvements despite the black metal being little familiar to the professor. He nevertheless quickly adapted it to the needs of the team, to which the professor just laughed. Although he was not a real teacher, he still had more than enough intelligence. He was pleased with the recognition. Fortunately for Patrick, Brandon finally gave the go-ahead to leave their hideout. The chubby guy's happiness knew no bounds about this. He was ready. He called the car a rhinoceros, smiling. He started the engine and was ready to race. The steering wheel felt pleasant in his hands and cooled his skin. It couldn't have been better. Brandon warned the remaining old man and girl that he would be in touch and count on them to help with a drone that matched their mission. Vanessa wished them luck one last time, assuring Brandon that they couldn't rely on her, just as long as they were careful. The knife trawl at the end of the rhinoceros made their way, and the speed allowed them to reach any point in their city. In a short time, the machine's power was enormous. Patrick was delighted with his new toy. He handled it as if he had been playing with it all his life, delighting him and making his insides tremble. The rhino drove through its first obstacle, a road blocked by cars. As if there was nothing on the highway, there wasn't even a scratch left on it. Patrick's face was painted with a smile. With such transport, they were not afraid of any enemies, and they could freely and safely go wherever they needed to go. Brandon was considering where to start. Remembering that Vanessa's father was seen on surveillance cameras in this area, they would begin the search from this area. But while they were searching, the complete absence of zombies was very strange. Patrick assumed that they had killed everyone near the laboratory. Before Brandon had time to answer, zombies of the first rank attacked the rhinoceros from different sides. But fortunately, the car withstood their blows. Some of the Reds tried to break through the windshield or, at a minimum, block people's view of the road. One of them had already pressed his muzzle to the glass. But the rhinoceros was equipped with more than just a knife trawl. Patrick was sure of this. He asked Brandon what other weapons the car had. At the present time, gunpowder weapons could not harm special zombies, but black metal made it possible to expand the capabilities of weapons. Having said this, Brandon pressed a button on the rhino's console, and a moment later the car was engulfed in green streams of lightning, tearing zombies to pieces. Patrick was very impressed by the picture of this massacre. He noted the high effectiveness of these weapons and was glad that the way was clear. And yet, Brandon planned to quickly find Vanessa's father and go back. They killed the last zombies in the area, and the swordsman asked Patrick to go faster. The man in the hat was interested in the sounds of the engine and the roar of special zombies being on the roof. He followed the strange transport with his eyes. Curiosity leapt up in him. The rhinoceros took them safe and sound to the place where the man was last seen, fortunately. They arrived without incident. Brandon quickly gave orders. He ordered the drone to be activated for air cover, and Patrick had to wait for further orders. Vanessa sat in front of the screen with the control panel, waking up the machine and confirming her readiness. She was glad to do at least something to find her father. The drone flew around all the upper floors of the building, but Vanessa saw only abandoned and cluttered rooms in which the former presence of people could be seen. The fat man and the swordsman were waiting in the rhino's cabin. The god drone was looking around. The lack of action got on Patrick's nerves. He asked what they would do. If Patrick was so bored from a lot of free time, then he could personally inspect the building. Brandon had hardly slept today and was exhausted, deciding to save his remaining strength. Patrick did not want to leave the safe space of the armored personnel carrier. He had the brilliant idea to honk the horn, so that if his father was here, he would come to the sound. But Brandon did not appreciate the idea and did not have time to stop his friend. A deafening sound was heard that attracted the attention of the hordes of the infected, which Vanessa notified them about. Brandon slapped Patrick on the back of the head for the future, so that bad thoughts would not come to him in the future. Patrick said offendedly that there shouldn't have been zombies here, but he was not very upset by the prospect of meeting the horde. The zombies gave him the opportunity to practice the entire arsenal contained in the rhinoceros. He began to press buttons unfamiliar to him when, after the first of the discs, blades appeared on the wheels of the transport, cutting through zombies like a knife through butter. The next button activated the laser guns, firing a red bunch of thermonuclear particles, the latter exploding upon contact with the target. A red flash illuminated the block. Patrick did not expect such force. Vanessa asked Schumacher to moderate his ardor and be careful. Her father could come under fire. Patrick apologized and tried to be more careful. But the buttons on the panel in front of him were not labeled, and he did not know what to expect from the next button. The next button activated the grinding millstones, falling into which the zombies turned into dust, and an inscription appeared on the console about the beginning of the collection of ferrous metal. Patrick came up with the idea that the machine could automatically hunt zombies, collecting a bloody harvest of black metal particles. Patrick was beside himself with happiness. He tearfully thanked his friend. Brandon managed to get to know his friend's preferences in weapons, as well as in food. Vanessa noticed very busy traffic on the other side of the street. She contacted her friends asking if this would be a problem, and the grateful Patrick still did not calm down, even after Brandon's comments and angry actions. When Vanessa's speaker transmitted that she had found something, she sent them an image on the console where, 500 meters away, there was an SUV loaded with various boxes. The car seemed to have been recently used. Patrick confirmed receipt of the information, and pressing the pedal to the floor, headed to the place indicated by the girl on the electronic map. Vanessa recognized her father's pickup truck. Flying closer, she noticed the emptiness of the car, as well as the damaged front part. Her father was somewhere nearby. Brandon said to carefully inspect the car for any note on his own. He could not go far in such a short time. The girl was already finishing her examination. When her head became filled with lead and her eyes were getting dark every second, the professor who entered the laboratory noticed the unconscious girl lying. The scientist took Vanessa to the infirmary. He contacted the team and conveyed to them the girl's deplorable condition. She was lying unconscious on the bed. The professor came to the conclusion that fear and fatigue had destroyed the baby's health. She needed peace. She was too overzealous at work. The situation was aggravated by developing leukemia, for which they had no cure, and during the apocalypse it was impossible to get it. But they could not leave her. The scientists suggested that Brandon look for a cure in the hospital. The institution in the past had a wealth of medicines. During the conversation, Patrick came running to the swordsman, saying that there was no information for Vanessa's father's car. They had to choose a new path. Patrick was surprised by how loaded the pickup truck was with resources. The girl's father ran away in a hurry, leaving all his things. But there was something else that seemed strange to the fat man. The car was filled to the brim with some strange black boxes, the size of cigarette boxes, but completely black and without distinctive signs or logos. Brandon assumed that these were boxes from an unknown medicine. They decided to take them with them and show them to the professor. But what to do with Vanessa's father? Brandon ordered to go to the hospital. The priority now was Vanessa's life and health, and they could continue the search after finding a cure. The professor warned them that he needed to continue experiments with black metal, and he could not use the drone to cover them. They were alone. Now Patrick understood Brandon's obvious reluctance to take the girl with him. He knew her leukemia and cared about her health and safety, but the disease was in advanced form. Even if they found a cure, Vanessa's chance of recovery was low, but Brandon rudely shut up the fat man and ordered him to move on. Brandon was consumed with thoughts in about 2 years. All the supplies in the city would run out, and the city would finally belong to the dead. A slight sadness fell on the young man's soul. Maybe he won't succeed, and everything he does to save the world is in vain. With such thoughts, he continued his move. The hand of the fire fiend was restored. The monster could not believe his eyes. The ampoule of the unknown person in the hat was working. His energy returned. The fiend felt unprecedented strength. His body was once again enveloped in flames, emitting a satisfied roar. He heard the speech of the hat, accompanied by the white user. The hat was pleasantly surprised that the monster was a bearer of fire, a rare gift for monsters, and useful for him. A syringe with the remains of the regenerative fluid was in his hand. Fiery was incredibly glad to feel the surge of strength again. He was grateful to the hat for the service rendered. Now, it was worth finding out which organization the unknown person belonged to. With his arms outstretched, the hat said that he was a representative of an organization that gathers black metal users to create a paradise on Earth. The idea of creating paradise on Earth was incredible and seemed impossible to Fire. He wondered if the hat himself was the bearer of power. "Of course," said the hat. "There were a huge number of users like him. You just had to look." Although the strange appearance of the person was unusual for a user. To the anomalist's question, the man answered positively that all this was for the sake of their happy new world, where there would be no worries and sorrows. Meanwhile, at the entrance to the clinic, the fat guy saw the signs "Private Property, Dangerous, Do Not Enter," and exclaimed whether the hospital had really been occupied by people. Brandon explained to him that such inscriptions are a common occurrence for strategically important objects. They will simply take what they need and leave. Entering the building, the guys did not find anyone. It was quiet all around, which is why tension was hidden in the air. All the walls were covered with intimidating messages, and Patrick became more and more nervous, holding his sword at the ready. Brandon suggested that the guys split up. He would go look for equipment, and he would look for medicine, and warned that if something happened, the guy would contact him. The fat man slowly moved along the corridor and looked unhappy, because the hospital was his second hated place in life, and the smell of peroxide alone made the guy tremble. Suddenly, the guy smelled a sharp, fruity smell. He sniffed it more and more. The smell turned out to be very sweet and attracted him more and more. In the end, the fat man collapsed unconscious on the floor. Meanwhile, Brandon lost contact with the guy and thought he was messing around again. Suddenly, the guy caught the same smell as Patrick. Only the main character knew this scent well. Reacting instantly, the guy put a mask on his face that looked like a gas mask. He released a stream of energy into the ceiling, causing him to detect purple smoke floating in the air. Afterwards, the guy alerted Fat Patrick that they had fallen into a trap and were leaving immediately. While moving, Brandon noticed a girl in a medical uniform with his peripheral vision, and at that very second, he launched the claws of his protective fur at her. As if nothing had happened, she absolutely calmly touched the claw and was inspired by the fur. In an instant, the girl jumped up, beaming with joy, and stated that she would be very grateful if the guy introduced her to the creator of this fur. She knew that the fur was made from pearls extracted from the brains of zombies. Brandon asked her who she was, because the girl didn't look like an anomaly because of her smell. The girl introduced herself as Amelia, a sweet and brilliant doctor of medical sciences. The guy asked the girl questions about whether she released poisonous gas through the hospital and ate pearls. She actually released the poisonous gas, as it effectively repels zombies and stupefies intruders. And what about pearls? Amelia didn't even know that they could be eaten. The main character did not reveal details and asked if the girl was alone here. She began to behave strangely and in response said that there was only one princess left in this abandoned castle, and then sarcastically asked if the guy intended to kidnap her from there, like some villain. Brandon was starting to lose patience with her weird jokes, asking if she was afraid of death, to which she replied in a blissful voice that death was as tempting for her as sweets in a candy store, and she wouldn't mind dying from what she loves. The guy thought she was crazy and asked what the girl specialized in, being a doctor of medical sciences. It turned out that she specializes in viral diseases and everything related to it. Hearing this, Brandon bombarded the girl with questions about the use of pearls. She just walked away and covered her ears with her hands, not wanting to discuss all the details. Turning around, she pointed her finger at him and scolded him for the fact that the guy does nothing but ask her endless questions, and reminded her that he still had not answered whether he could introduce her to the creator of the fur. He told the girl about their research center and said that if she wanted, he could take her there, to which the girl was delighted. She also had a request that the guy had to agree to. Next, the story of the past is shown. Fat Patrick, sitting in the car, contacts his friend Akun by phone. Their partner Marie sits cheekily on the hood of a luxury car and talks about how much she likes to set others up. Akun reports that Lao said that this is their last task, and once they finish, they will finally return home and marry Marie. All three found the object they needed on the horizon and prepared to carry out the mission. They agreed that as soon as the target reached the desired location, Lao would give them a signal, after which they would begin to act. Marie began to act before the signal began, and Patrick nervously tried to contact the girl. It turned out that the girl's convertible flew into a large truck at full speed, and Kun was racing on a motorcycle in front of the truck, and immediately told the fat man that everything had not gone according to plan, and that he should leave quickly. Still sitting in the car, Patrick saw a combat vehicle flying behind him and began to panic they had been seen through. Present, Fat Patrick woke up and saw his friend and girlfriend standing in front of him. The main character jokingly asked if the guy had gotten enough sleep, and then ordered him to get up and get to work. Amelia explained to the fat man that he had been poisoned with a gas specially developed by her, and if antibodies were not injected in the next 3 hours, he would turn into a puddle of pus. Patrick was perplexed and panicked. Brandon asked the guy to stop yelling and help him drag the cans into the car. Immediately, the girl joined his request, informing the fat man that these samples were very important to her. Patrick only explained why everyone so likes to force him to do everything he doesn't want. Immediately, Amelia came close to him and muttered that if he broke even one, she would personally put the fat man in them. Quickly, the guys began dragging samples with human organs into the car. While moving the cans, Brandon thought about who the girl was, returning to the idea of poisonous gas. On that day of judgment, poisonous gas was often used by the leaders of various gangs, so they defended themselves from zombies and attacked their enemies. The poisonous gas honey cloud puts a person into a state of calm, and at the same time causes fear in him. The guy couldn't believe whether this girl really was the gas developer, and if she is also a genius mechanic like Dr. Henry, then he should keep a close eye on her, and also prevent her from falling into the hands of a gang of Twilight dragons. Finally, the guys finished with the samples, and the fat man breathed a sigh of relief. The doctor examined their combat vehicle and was amazed at its appearance. Observing the girl's behavior, Patrick only asked Brandon if it was a good idea to take her with him. The guy explained to the fat man that with the doctor, they would have a better chance of curing Vanessa. Suddenly, on the roof of a nearby building, the company discovered a huge, anomalous beast ready to attack. The monster attacked, and the fat guy in a panic asked questions about who he was. Brandon took the situation into his own hands and ordered the others to quickly get into the car. In an instant, he released a stream of protective energy at the anomaly. However, the beast managed to escape his attack and he rushed straight to the guy. In the car, Patrick tried to reassure the doctor that they could leave quickly, but the guy himself was trembling with fear. Connecting the signal to Brandon, he asked what was happening outside and if the guy was okay. Already in the fight with the anomaly, Brandon made a decision and shouted to the fat man to take the doctor away, and he would deal with the beast himself. Instantly, he slammed his metal fist into the beast's face and launched an energy attack at it. In the car, Patrick kept trying to find out what kind of monster it was. In the back seat, the girl suddenly said that this huge dog had been wandering around the hospital for the past few days, which is why no one could go outside. And then a verbal brawl ensued. The fat guy was indignant that Amelia knew about the monster and did not tell them anything, but the girl explained this by saying that since the guys got into the hospital building, that is, they knew about the monster. And if the guys have such advanced equipment, the monster will not be a problem for them. After which, the girl asked if the guys were members of the Doomsday team, to which Patrick replied that now was not the time for jokes. The doctor replied that she was not joking, and that she had carefully studied the zombie virus that had spread throughout the world. And given the fact that they are still alive, they can already be considered the chosen ones. Meanwhile, Brandon continued to fight the beast. He mentally realized that at this time there should not be such a beast. A super beast, not at all like a domestic or wild animal, mutated as a result of infection with a zombie virus. He was bred using advanced genetic engineering and was fused with a zombie virus, a product not of this time. Brandon seemed to understand what was going on. The guy sent a beam attack at the monster, which he sharply reflected, which confirmed Brandon's guesses. The beast attacked him, attacking with sharp claws, but the guy jumped back in time. Once behind the monster, Brandon grabbed it by the appendage on its neck and grinned. The bitch should have been more flexible. Having torn off his energy appendage, the guy armed himself with electric current. Now the beast is unable to repel the blows, and Brandon prepared for his fatal attack. Taking off with the help of the fur, he dealt a crushing blow to the thug and slammed his face into the asphalt. Next, he finished him off with a direct blow, and the blood scattered everywhere. Having opened his brain, the guy took out a huge green pearl. Such a pearl was called a heart beyond the beast, transformed black gold implanted into the animal. With such props in hand, Brandon's subsequent work will go much faster. Meanwhile, on the roof of a nearby building, a man who watched their entire fight and thoughtfully said that the guy would become a serious obstacle. After moving to a clearer area, Brandon tried to contact Fat Patrick, but it seemed they had gone far enough that the signal was not getting through. The guy decided to return to base alone and took off. Having risen high enough, Brandon noticed a man standing on the roof, the one who was watching everything that was happening. He greeted the guy positively and tried to talk to him, but Brandon immediately launched a beam attack at him. In response, the man teleported to a nearby roof and shouted to the guy not to be so impulsive. He was not going to harm him. Without listening, the guy attacked him with beam energy. The man teleported again, this time directly onto the handle of the mech, and said that he was just here to give the guy a message, and it wouldn't take him long. Brandon was annoyed and grabbed him in both paws of the fur, placing him at the level of his face, and wished to continue the dialogue in this format. The man introduced himself as Song Bin from the Organization of Darkness and said that, on the orders of their technical consultant, the guy was invited to visit them, after which he told them the location. He also admitted that he initially expected to invite Dr. Amelia, but now all that remains is, the man didn't have time to finish. Brandon crushed him with metal hands. Blood remained on them, but no body was found. The man turned out to be an anomaly with the ability to be replaced with a bloody corpse. The guy was lost in his thoughts. Had the Organization of Darkness really already formed? 50 years later, the Organization of Darkness became the most powerful organization in the world. They possessed colossal reserves of resources and gathered various kinds of elite representatives. Surely that techno-beast was created by them, and they must have been closely watching Brandon and his team for a long time. The virus has just broken out, and the Organization of Darkness has already been formed. There can only be one reason. This reason, someone from this organization also returned from the future. The girl with pink hair is surprised by the simplicity of the science center and doubts that this is where the fur and the machine were created. The bald guy is surprised that Brandon didn't tell the girl anything, but she still went with them. The girl, in response, claims that she is good at understanding people. She thanks him for his help with the banks. The guy replies that for Vanessa's sake, he will do whatever is necessary. An old man comes out of the building towards them. He is surprised that they actually found a doctor. The girl greets him and wonders if he is the same doctor who created the fur in this fighting machine. She introduces herself with the name Amelia. She is also a doctor and is here to meet him. The old man introduces himself in response to Henry. Amelia claims that despite the man's casual clothing, he could not hide the temperament of a mad scientist, which makes Henry awkward. He mentions that he has heard about her, the youngest and most talented specialist in the field of virology, who has also published in scientific journals. Tan is very embarrassed and flattered that the man knows so much about her and her success in science. But the girl immediately offers to postpone the casual conversation until later and get down to business. She explains that she wants to work with him to study black pearls. She assumes that since he created such fur from these pearls, then he must understand perfectly what it is. Henry calls the pearl black gold, which surprises the girl. She asks if he came up with such a name. Grandfather is wondering what to do because he is not the doctor she is talking about. One way or another, Brandon does not want to tell all the secrets about black gold, so it will be better to study it with Amelia. He says out loud that he will be glad to study black gold and that he has made many discoveries recently. Only at first, he rather shyly asks her to help with something. Vanessa lies unconscious in a hospital bed. Several medical devices are connected to her. Amelia monitors her condition and writes notes in her notebook. Henry asks with concern what's wrong with the girl. The girl rereads her notes and thinks. She asks how the girl is related to the man. He replies that they are not related, but he treats her like a granddaughter. Amelia says she can only say one thing and raises an OK sign with her hand. Grandfather assumes that everything is fine based on the meaning of this gesture. But this is not what the girl meant. The man is afraid that she only has 3 years left. Amelia reveals that she only has 3 months left, which horrifies Henry. She has encountered such a disease countless times. She doesn't know how Vanessa is still alive. Her current body condition is no longer able to take higher doses of chemotherapy. And due to the influence of abnormal viruses, conventional methods are not able to eliminate the tumor. The man is frantically trying to figure out what to do next. The girl's life is very dear to him. Holding the ball in her hands, Amelia suggests using it because there are no other options. At this time, Vanessa comes to her senses and hears Amelia's conversation with Henry, their discussion that she should eat the pearl. The girl offers to feed her this because the balls are digested. She intends to use this black gold to create a new medicine that will replace chemotherapy. She has already tried it under special conditions. This black gold is activated, emits unusual energy, and thereby helps restore damaged cells, and also creates a new shell around them. Henry here mentions anomalies who became like this by eating black gold, and he will not allow this to happen to Vanessa. Amelia asks what kind of idiot would eat these black pearls. He says that he saw several of them. After eating black gold, they received powerful superpowers. The girl says that this is something new, and asks to tell her more about it. Consuming such an energy substance without conducting research can cause extremely unstable consequences. In this case, this is exactly what they should study. She will be able to quickly finish preparing the medicine, and then she will need his help. He asks her to be careful. He doesn't want to see Vanessa turn into a monster, but there is no time left. They have no other choice. The heavy-set guy has finally moved all of Amelia's cans and sighs as he wipes the sweat from his face. He wonders what is so valuable about these zombies cut into pieces. The girl doctor thanks him for his help. He carefully asks if the girl's illness is curable. She replies that the chances are quite high. While she's okay, the guy decides to go and check on Brandon. Amelia also mentions that Dr. Henry talked about finding the girl's father. She asks if possible to return him safe and sound. This will greatly help her healing. Brandon, in the exosuit, is completely roasted in the sun. The thick metal suit makes everything worse. A lot of time has passed, and his friend Patrick still has not returned for him. While looking for water, Brandon stumbles upon a shopping center and flies towards it. Inside, he discovers a swimming pool and is surprised by this. Although he was thirsty, out of the corner of his ear he catches a sound. Someone or something is rushing past him. He immediately attacks the source of the movement with a blast of energy from the suit's hand. A huge reptile flies up to him, and opening its mouth, bites the guy's suit. He tries to hold off the bite with his hands. The reptile throws itself towards Brandon, disorienting him with a strong blow. Swinging and preparing a discharge, the main character jumped on the monster, ready to attack. After some brief hand-to-hand combat, Brandon fires a green energy beam at the reptile's jaw. From the huge reptilian body, the female mutated body of a monster with red hair separates. The bald guy is driving and notices that the streets are too quiet. Brandon should have finished off that monster already. Suddenly, Vanessa's voice is heard from the speaker. She woke up and tried to contact the guy. She reports that she feels better and asks if the bald guy is still outside. He says that in her current state, she should rest well. Let her leave the search to them. The girl insists that she still cannot sleep and will continue the search. Patrick agrees, but asks not to force himself and entrusts her with aerial reconnaissance. Vanessa is surprised by something, and the guy asks if she found Brandon, but not really. She sees a group of zombies around a construction site. The zombies surrounded someone there. They gathered around a blue metal container in a tight circle. There is a girl on the roof of the container building block, scared and covered with a dirty blanket. The bald guy recognizes her as a girl from Lowe's gang after their victory over them. She disappeared somewhere. He directs the car there. They decide to save the girl from the crowd of zombies. Patrick drives the crowd around the container at high speed, getting closer to them. Vanessa tells the girl from the drone that now they will disperse the monsters, and she must wait for the right moment and jump into the car. The girl jumps into the car from the container at the right moment. She recognizes the bald guy. He proudly introduces their team as the Invincible Doomsday Team. At this time, Brandon flies away from the reptile's blow, falling in a dirty suit. The bright glow of green pearls in the reptile's eyes burns out his retina, and he tries to shield himself from this light with his hand. His protective mask was damaged in the previous battle. He cannot use it. The guy fires a blast of energy from the suit's hand, but the reptile dodges to the side. With her tail, she grabs the leg of the exoskeleton, lifting it into the air above the pool. Brandon falls and is submerged in the water wearing a heavy suit and goes to the bottom due to the impressive weight. With its bright gaze, the reptile makes it impossible for the guy to move. Her tail is already heading towards the guy's head, and he is preparing for sudden death. But then 2 beams of green charge pierce the wall, hitting the reptile. Baldy asks loudly how Brandon is and announces that the Doomsday Team is already here. Taking advantage of the fact that the reptile is distracted, Brandon grabs its tail with his suit hand. He tells her that they are not finished yet. She should not think about running away. The main character orders Patrick to shoot lasers at the reptile if this creature looks closely at him. Hearing a positive answer, Brandon fires bolts of energy from both hands at the monster. The reptile falls exhausted to the floor from the blow, but tries to get up. Grabbing her head, the guy wonders how the hybrid anomaly ended up here. He asks her, pinning her to the ground, if the Organization of Darkness sent him to kill him. In response to her silence, Brandon tells her to speak, and if she can't, then slap herself as a positive response. Hearing the name Organization of Darkness, the reptile becomes hysterical and shouts that he will not return there. From the car, the bald guy wonders how the big dog he was fighting with turned into a reptile. Seeing the girl in the cabin of the car, the reptile seems to recognize her and reaches out to her, calling her Lena. Her screams irritate Brandon, and he threatens to strangle her if she continues to make noise. Getting out of the car, Lena recognizes her sister Annie in the reptile. Patrick is surprised that this monster is her sister. Apparently, she also ate black gold and became an anomaly. Lena asks what happened to her, and she says that the Organization of Darkness and their experiments, which was very painful. Brandon irritably asks if they have talked enough, because he is ready to end her suffering. Lena asks not to do this. She is her sister, although she doesn't know who made a monster out of her. Vanessa intervenes, saying that they are sisters and have just reunited. They can't kill her. Brandon tells her not to be so naive. She is fused with the super beast. Her mind is no longer in a normal state. The girl tearfully asks him to let him conquer them. Let them at least try. Brandon was full of anger and said that this creature almost killed him, so he will not feel sorry for her. The fat man objected to him because it was Vanessa who noticed how the monster dragged her brother under the water, and if she had not told him to come here, then he does not think that the guy would have been standing here. Anomalous Annie saw a girl's hand timidly touch her. She was very excited. She stood up and stammered, asking if they were representatives of the Darkness Organization. But Lena replied that they were looking for survivors in the city. Annie admitted that she ran away, and the Organization of Darkness brought a large dog here to track her down. Lena asked her if she attacked her brother because she mistook him for one of the Organization of Darkness and just wanted to protect herself, and Annie replied that she was just scared. She said that she didn't want to harm anyone, as long as Lena was okay, and she affectionately called Annie her sister. A voice came from the depths of the room, saying that the research institute was spacious, and there were few people there, and that the doctors were working on zombies and might help Lena's sister. It was a fat man who, however, noticed that Annie did not seem to fit in the car. Annie leaned over to her sister and told her that wherever she went, she would follow her, and Lena said her name with tears in her eyes. The fat man shouted to his sister Vanessa if she really wanted to invite this monster woman to them, and Brandon noted that together they would feel safer. The fat man got behind the wheel of the car and offered to drive, since the main character had given his tacit consent. In the bushes growing along the road along which the car was moving, the figure of a monster grew, its red mane fluttering in the wind. The fat man, tightly gripping the steering wheel with both hands, admired his speed. And then the doctor and his research assistant, Dr. Amelia, looked up in amazement, examining this blue monster with a red mane. They asked Brandon how it happened, and he, standing by the car with a gloomy look, clenched his teeth and did not answer. Lena said that her real name was Yolena. She and her sister lived in the western region, and when the disaster struck, they left for the south, and now they were together again, the sisters standing next to each other, feeling how close they were to each other, despite how different they were now. Dr. Amelia was curious to take a closer look at Annie, and she took a few steps towards her. And suddenly, in just a few seconds, she dived underground. Only a blue tail with red streaks had time to flash. The woman was surprised. She could not understand whether Annie was afraid of strangers or whether this was a manifestation of sociopathy. At this time, the fat man standing behind the car asked Lena how she ended up at the construction site, because there was no water or food there, and besides, she was there alone. Lena admitted that at first, there was a man with her who took her with him, and with him she was hiding from the zombies, but then he had to leave, and he told her to wait for him at the construction site. She told the fat man that she never waited for her companion, and the fat man wondered who could lead her through a city full of zombies. Lena said that the man gave her a cloak sticky with zombie flesh and blood so that she could hide her smell. The zombies wouldn't smell it, and the fat man was surprised that it seemed to be that same person. Then Vanessa screamed and asked about Lena's companion, if he was a tall man with a short haircut, and if by chance his name was Alex. Lena replied that it seemed so, and the girl's eyes filled with tears because Alex was her dad. The girl fell to the floor and began to sob, and Grandpa Henry and his employee rushed to her to console her. Dr. Henry asked if Vanessa was okay, and Dr. Amelia, calling her a pumpkin, complained that she left the ward without permission. The fat man, sitting in the car, suggested that his brother go again and look for the girl's father. But Brandon objected, saying that night would soon fall, and it would become even more dangerous outside, that the mech needed repairs, and that the defenses around the scientific institute needed to be strengthened. Dr. Henry, clenching his fists, walked towards the schoolboy and demanded that everything be explained properly, because he seemed to know everything. He angrily said that he did not know for what purpose Brandon was protecting these secrets and what he was fighting against, and although he did not pry into the student's personal affairs, he was uneasy in his soul. The fat man agreed with him, and remarked that if something happened to the guy and they couldn't help, then it would all be over. The student thought about it and decided that it was time to talk to everyone. He gathered everyone in the room and said that he was the one who returned to the past 50 years later. The fat man asked in amazement if this was time travel, and noted that he had always believed that Brandon was not an ordinary person. Dr. Henry was also surprised whether in the future it would be possible to return to the past, and asked whether the physical body or consciousness moves in this case. And it seemed incredible to Dr. Amelia that 50 years later the human race would still exist. Brandon took out the ball and, holding it in his hand, said that the source of everything was still black gold. He also noted that this is the cause of the disaster, as well as the basis of scientific and technological progress. They researched black gold to understand how to fight the zombie virus, and their latest achievement was a time machine that moved consciousness through space and time within the radiation of black gold energy. But unfortunately, although they had the opportunity to go back in time, they were unable to prevent the emergence of the zombie virus. They could only transfer consciousness to the earliest period of the virus outbreak. Brandon asked the doctor if he had examined the composition of black gold, because it does not look like terrestrial chemical elements. And due to the loss of data, one can only assume that most likely, this thing came to them from outer space. The fat man was even more amazed and asked if this was an alien invasion. Lena noted that if this were so, then the aliens should have already enslaved them. And the guy said that the virus had wiped out humanity from the face of the earth for several years, and after 50 years, there were very few people left in the world, tens or several millions, and maybe less. But even despite this, people still did not stop fighting and killing each other over resources, and in the organization where he was, all his predecessors were older than him, but they were all killed. Therefore, the main character was ultimately left alone, and he had to complete the last task of the organization, return to the past and restore it again. The fat man said that now he understood why the student hunted so furiously for black gold, and asked if Brandon was really more than 50 years old. The schoolboy grinned and replied that he might be over 70, and the fat boy seemed to have suddenly aged dramatically, and the student said that his consciousness returned to the moment when he first saw zombies at school. With enemy soldiers standing at their walls, there was no time left to make precise calculations, and when his partner teleported him, he had to blow up the laboratory and bury the time machine under its remains. The main character sadly said that he did not know how they checked the results of the experiment. The fat man exclaimed that it was the first time he had heard a student talk so much, and the doctor's assistant concluded that since he was talking about his life, it meant that they were his future partners. Brandon said gloomily that he was not sure. but he would really like to hope that this would be the case. He said that changes had already occurred and asked Dr. Amelia if she had studied the properties of the zombie virus and if she had managed to find out anything. She, raising her finger up importantly, noted that it was a miracle that they were able to survive at all, because the zombie virus is not only infected after a zombie bite. Amelia shivered and almost whispered that this virus is actually transmitted by airborne droplets. Everyone jumped up from their seats in amazement, screaming, and the doctor asked how they survived. She replied that they are the chosen ones of heaven, and that the antibodies in their bodies prevent the spread of the virus, and this is amazing. But she also noted that this does not guarantee that after being bitten by a zombie, they will not undergo changes. Brandon gloomily confirmed that this is so, and that their bodies are already infected with the zombie virus. And even if they are not bitten, sooner or later they can turn into zombies. And although they are immune to the virus, this does not mean at all that they have nothing to fear. The fat man said that he understood why the student did not share anything with them. And Yebe told him that before that, he doubted that it was worth talking about it. But what happened today confirmed his guesses. And he noticed that some accelerated the spread and mutation of the zombie virus. And this is the Organization of Darkness. At this time and in another place, a guy with the remains of terrible horns sticking out on his head joyfully said that he had become a man again. A blond man in sunglasses and a top hat chuckled and told him that he was now officially a member of the Darkness Organization. The guy happily responded that he was very happy about this and thanked this man for his help. Brandon, continuing to remember, said that basically everyone got infected from a zombie bite, but the time of absorption of sunlight for the first wave of mutation increased to a couple of days, and the likelihood that ordinary people would turn into anomalies increased. And if we take into account today's super beast and those fused anomalies, there is no doubt that the Organization of Darkness has worked on them. The fat man and Amelia listened anxiously to the guy's words, because he was sure that the Organization of Darkness also sent its people from the future. Maybe they managed to restore the destroyed time machine. Patrick asked that since the Dark Organization had a time machine and a way to control the zombie virus, why didn't they go back in time to save humanity? Brandon replied that the Organization of Darkness will do anything but save humanity, and that they recognize anomalies as a higher being compared to humans. They intend to create a world in which anomalies will dominate. And to put it another way, their goal is to destroy humanity. And then Dr. Henry thoughtfully tugged at his gray beard and said that maybe something could be done. He said that he took several drugs from the black boxes that Patrick brought for analysis and found that their composition was similar to the composition of black gold, and that there was quite a lot of this gold in the drug solution. Henry suggested that it seemed like some kind of catalyst, and Dr. Amelia listened to him with excitement. Grandfather asked the schoolboy if it was possible for the Dark Organization to secretly distribute such drugs to everyone, and he gloomily confirmed this, saying that they could add it to tap water and drinks. The fat man suddenly stopped him, saying that he remembered that they found these drugs in Vanessa's dad's car because he couldn't be one of them. Brandon replied that this needs to be checked, and that as long as the Organization of Darkness continues to exist, humanity will last at most 5 years, and maybe even less. He asked Henry to discuss with him the location of the Institute's defenses, where it was necessary to install the poisonous gas developed by Dr. Amelia, and she would do everything possible to cure Vanessa. She easily agreed and asked the main character if this girl was his sister, but Brandon snapped that there was no time for chatter, and the Institute must be immediately strengthened. At this time, Vanessa woke up in the hospital room and sat up on the bed. She was still connected to the ventilation system. She glanced at Lena, saw that she was sleeping, quietly took the device off her face, put on her slippers, and carefully left the room. The girl wandered through the empty corridors in the hope of seeing someone, but there was no one. In the laboratory, Amelia sat at her workstation and muttered that the guy didn't look like an inventor, and that perhaps her guesses were correct. She hoped that coming here would help solve some problems, but she wasn't sure about it, because so far they had only become more numerous. And then she saw Vanessa, who, with a pale and unhappy look, quietly entered her laboratory, scolded the girl for leaving again without permission, and told her to return. Of course, Amelia understood that the girl missed her dad, but because of this, her health cannot be neglected, and Dr. Henry, like the others, is already resting, so Vanessa can meet with them tomorrow. The girl timidly asked who Dr. Amelia was just talking to. She was afraid that the zombie was already here. The girl laughed and pointed to a large tank with a zombie's head in front of her. She said that she had been in love with this guy since childhood and that he was such a jerk. He was such a meek, good-natured, timid guy, but he often overestimated his strength. It was obvious that he did not like working as a doctor, but he still tried very hard to pass the exams. He was repeatedly refused, but he stubbornly continued. Amelia affectionately stroked the tank with the zombie's head and said that despite everything, he was the only one who remained on her side. The old bastards who sit in hospitals and profit from the results of other people's work wanted to steal her research results, but only he dared to speak out in her defense and clear her name. Even when a disaster happened and zombies attacked them, the young man defended her from these monsters to the last. During the poison gas test, he allowed himself to be surrounded by zombies so that Amelia would have time to escape. And when he became infected, he tried to fight the zombies, but they tore him apart. And when she looked at the mutilated corpses that lay there everywhere, she no longer knew where exactly his remains were. The woman kept thinking whether it would be possible to bring this guy back to life if all the parts of his body were connected. However, she then laughed nervously and hastened to reassure Vanessa that everything she said was a joke and that resurrecting zombies were not funny at all. The woman apologized to the girl for making her remember all this, and she suddenly turned to her. Vanessa timidly, stumbling over every word, suggested that maybe Amelia really liked this guy. She agreed that it was impossible not to fall in love with such a handsome man and then sent the girl back to bed because the woman needed to stay here a little longer and then dive to find Miss Annie. When the girl approached the water, a shadow was visible in it, and then a strange creature appeared from there. It looks at Vanessa kindly, turns to her, says that it wants to hide so that they don't find her. Vanessa says that the Organization of Darkness has treated her badly and her body has become so uncomfortable. The creature replies that it doesn't want to remember, it was scary, but now it doesn't hurt. Miss Annie says that Sister Vanessa will be hurt, asks if it hurts now. Vanessa gives a positive answer, saying that she thought she could get used to it if she endured it. Whatever they become, all that matters is that they are still human. Having finished speaking, her body began to weaken, and she lost consciousness, falling onto the creature's tail. The creature wrapped its tail around the baby, supposedly making a crib, and she continued to lie unconscious. The girl got worried and ran to the baby. She told her to lie in the room, and she went outside. She says that if Vanessa continues like this, she will never be cured. Slightly conscious, the girl asks Dr. Tan in a weak voice to finish the operation quickly. The man is looking for Miss Marie. He doesn't know where she went or if zombies attacked her. But as a rule, if there is no bleeding, then the zombies won't feel you, which means they shouldn't have attacked her. He looks at the asphalt and sees huge wheel tracks. He doesn't understand who is here. A whistle is heard high in the sky as a man hides from a dragon-like creature. He had already relaxed, thinking that it had passed, but suddenly a bearded man appeared, shouting that he had found him. Vanessa lies in a green glass box with a breathing tube, and a doctor stands next to her. Dr. Henry worries whether black gold will really cure Vanessa. Brandon says that the baby needs to get used to the energy of black gold. At the moment she is in remission, he combined part of the heart of the super beast with red and black gold. The doctor will perform the operation according to the formula he provided her. Until the chain reaction exceeds the threshold of sensitivity, she is not in danger. Grandpa asks whether such experiments were carried out in the future, and whether he also participated in the creation of anomalies. This method is just a side effect in creating anomalies, and some call it the elixir of immortality. It is somewhat effective in curing diseases, but Brandon does not know if it grants immortality. Brandon says that if this method doesn't work, then they will have no other choice. Patrick, driving, tells Miss Lena that there are too many ordinary zombies here. They are already near the construction site where they met her. She apologizes, because she is not very good at flying a drone, nor is she very good at using a computer. It's a bit tricky when you have to view so many surveillance screens at once. Patrick says that Vanessa's dad is not an ordinary person, which means he should notice them. The girl says that she has already found him with the help of a drone. He is running on the other side. Vanessa's dad is running for a reason. He is running away from a group of zombie-like monsters. He throws off his cloak, which flies into the crowd of monsters, but fire cans fly after him. Everything explodes and starts to burn. The monsters are drowned in flames, but there is no effect on them. A green laser erupts from Patrick's tank and hits two monsters at once. Patrick makes a sharp U-turn and, driving up to Vanessa's father, asks if it is him. Patrick shouts that there's no time to explain, and that the man should quickly get into the car. The man sits down asking to be taken to Vanessa, and Patrick hits the gas, taking off. Two men in suits are watching this. One asks if Vanessa's father can be let go so easily. But they are all targets under the advisor's special attention and should be taken seriously. Another believes that it would be better to do away with them right away. Engaging in petty dirty tricks is not their style. But it's not his style to say that he himself understands perfectly well that they don't have enough hands. Recently, a girl mutated into a supreme anomaly. She took control of 1,000 zombies to attack them. But she was still defeated. She could not be saved. A high anomalist capable of controlling 1,000 zombies is a huge loss. This is true, because for them even one zombie is considered a huge loss. Vanessa's father is confused. He has not seen old Henry for a long time, and he is very glad to see them. The man apologizes because he made the guys worry, and he is very sorry that this happened. But there is no need to waste time on empty chatter. He needs to wash, disinfect, and see Vanessa. The old man says that her condition worsened. She was constantly searching for survivors and her father. The man begins to blame himself, saying that he is an idiot and should have returned earlier. Grandpa Henry says he's sorry because the man had a hard time too, but he has a lot to discuss. He is holding an incomprehensible object in his hands. It was found in his car, but he himself does not know what it is. The Organization of Darkness gave it to him. He thought they were helping distribute medicine. They agreed to help him cure Vanessa. He didn't think it would work out that way. Old Henry asks if he has joined them and if he knows how the medicine works. He only knows that the spread of zombies in the city is connected with this medicine, so he wanted to leave the organization. He pretended to continue delivering the goods and wanted to run away with Vanessa, but zombies blocked the road, so he had to call her and tell her to close all the windows and doors. But she disobeyed and went to do good and continued to look for her father. The man thinks that this is his punishment because he always told his daughter to do good deeds, but he himself spread evil. He cries, calls himself a terrible father, but they ask him to stop because Vanessa is still alive. Dr. Amelia came to take some blood from the man, and he better be her biological father. Their blood types do not match Vanessa's. Otherwise, they would have cured her. The only hope is her father. The father agrees. He asks to take as much blood from him as needed, just to save Vanessa. Amelia says that such self-sacrifice is good, because otherwise she would have to use black gold. He began to shout that she should not dare to do this, and under no circumstances should she use black gold. He doesn't know how to explain, but the Organization of Darkness will use black gold for some kind of experiment. In terms of scale, it will cover the entire city of Anshi and will cause many people to die. But hasn't everyone in this area turned into zombies? And there are no immortals either. In general, you cannot use black gold, because they said that it would affect everything that was connected with it. Unfortunately, there is no other way out because they can only fight this with the help of black gold. Vanessa's father shouts that they need to run away quickly and that they can no longer stay here. He doesn't pay attention to the fact that Vanessa can't leave the hospital room. He wants to take her and run. Suddenly, Brandon knocks him out with a wrench, saying that he is too noisy. He asks to quickly take blood from his father and carry out the operation, because now there's no time to waste. A guy with long hair asks the bartender how he feels about the Organization of Darkness. Wiping the glass, he replies that all his comrades died and he was left alone. The guy throwing the dart says he wanted to protect his only remaining comrade. The guy says that they could become comrades, but he thought that there would be more of them. Of course, there are more of them, members of the organization around the world, but now they are busy recruiting people. The blonde guy is very interested in what kind of society the anomalies will be able to form. They no longer feel the need for food, they can change their appearance at will, but it is unlikely that they can be easily united. Well said, this is exactly the problem the counselor is thinking about now they are listening to it. The guy asks if the person from the future can be trusted at all, to which the other thinks yes. He remembers how the advisor mentioned him, saying that he would do well in life and would have merit. The question follows that Brandon also returned from the future, so why doesn't he want to be anomalous? This is because he is not very capable. He was always worse than others, so he used the time machine to improve his past. But Brandon, whom the guy knew before, and this one are completely two different people, so it turns out that he is trying to settle scores with those who used to mock him. The guy with the beard is in favor of eliminating Brandon's thorn and let the anomalies rule the world. The world that Brandon strives for is too different from the world of the Organization of Darkness. Therefore, they should get rid of it. But now there is still a chance to win him over to your side and introduce him to new ideas. They are created from black gold, and it is the whole meaning of their existence. They abandoned their previous body and found a new life. They want to study black gold in more detail in order to become the most powerful beings on Earth and in the entire universe. Patrick says Brandon mentioned his future partners and he asks where they are now. They must be young now, and it would be awkward for Brandon if they met them but didn't recognize him. The present and the future have changed. He does not know whether they are alive now and whether they can be met in the same places. Patrick wonders what to do now so that he can restore the old team. His partners are not specific people, but those who believe in the same idea as him, and Patrick is interested in which one. His idea is to destroy black gold and anomalies throughout the world and bring back humanity. It sounds unattainable, which is why there are few people on the team, because in the future, everyone could not completely abandon black gold, no matter how much harm it brought. Human cities regularly sent criminals and rebels to mine black gold. People trying to survive preferred to simply obey, and there were fewer dissenters. Brandon plunged into a pool of memories. His voice was with notes of sadness. In the past, in order to obtain black metal, renegades and the rabble of society were brought to zombie reservations. But even then, people silently obeyed, and those who disagreed were exterminated. Patrick was amazed by Earth's past, although he found it strange that despite Brandon's desire to destroy the sources of the black metal, the young man himself was excellent at controlling weapons from it. Brandon was not embarrassed by his friend's question. In order to effectively fight the enemy, they had to study it completely. They had to know the essence of the metal in order to effectively destroy it. While repairing the rhinoceros, Brandon notified his friend that after their victory over their enemies, they would also be responsible for the destruction of all black metal weapons, including the ones they had in their possession. Patrick was very inspired by the words of the swordsman. He was pleased that next to him was a man of such responsible and pure views. The young man never ceased to amaze the fat man with how little he knew Brandon. But the guy quickly cooled his friend's ardor, in fact. His convictions were not as firm as it seemed to Patrick, unlike his friends, without whom Brandon would have lost his spirit and will long ago. Vanessa's face was illuminated by laboratory lamps. The capsule's reservoir refracted the light, giving it a turquoise tint, and the oxygen mask with a tube on the girl's face also drove the girl into a slight coma. The professor, sitting opposite the bed, was working on a tablet when the man woke up. His past wanderings had exhausted him mentally and physically. However, the professor noted the end of the reign, which could not but rejoice. The man's thoughts were filled with panic. The organization was about to begin its experiment on the world, and they should hide. But the scientist was calm as ice. He reasoned that if the experiment had such a global scale, it was useless to run. However, in Brandon's plan, there was no clause about escape. The young man had a plan. He was not going to just wait for another end of the world with folded hands, and certainly not to run away. Vanessa, knowing the impending storm, shared the views of the sword-bearer. The girl's father noted that the girl's fearlessness was due to her childhood naivety, as well as his own upbringing. Despite this, inside he was still proud of his daughter's will. But the scientist did not agree with him. During the entire time she was with them, Vanessa had the opportunity to see all sorts of horrors. She went through many tests, after which her decisions could not be attributed to naivety. The girl grew up, and with her, her views. The professor was sure that the baby's will was much stronger than they all thought. She was not making a childish decision. The girl, knowing the risks, still asked the doctor for the operation, although the danger was high. The story and the meeting with the girl aroused the ancient memories of the old man, and he once had a son. But in raising him, the scientist was strict, sometimes even too strict, which ended in a conflict between them, and they moved away. The wounds of his soul were still tormented by conscience and deep pain. He did not have enough time to return peace to his relationship with his son. His child died before the moment when the elder was able to apologize. Although there was a chance that his son returned, it was nevertheless small. Or his son refused to visit his father one way or another. The professor no longer worried about it so much. He still had things to do. The past was not in the power of the scientist. He decided to end this conversation with Vanessa's father. He had to do a lot before a new Armageddon began. It was cloudy and damp outside, although the moisture gave the fur a special tint. Brandon checked the basic systems of the robot. Patrick's passion at the sight of his fur again captured the fat man. He loved the guy's things like that too much. Representatives of the organization wanted to meet with them, and since he was going to meet the lion, he should be fully armed, ready for any scenario. The chance of a trap was huge. Brandon would not be himself if he missed such a sweet opportunity to destroy the organization's lair, in which the mecha would help him. Thinking about this, he pressed the button, activating the helmet and the main systems of the robot. But the young man could not leave the research center without protection, which he placed on the shoulders of his friend Patrick, warning him that he was the main defender in his absence. The fat man met his friend's order with enthusiasm and a fighting spirit. He had a great responsibility. Brandon was counting on him, and he could not let him down. A lot was at stake today. The noise of the bellows accelerators was heard, and the nozzles spewed out green flames, lifting the steel mechanism into the sky at great speed. Patrick followed him with his eyes and wished him good luck. Behind the fur's body in the sky, a trail of green glow continued, clearly visible in the cloudy dark sky. The hat admired the fur. They were ready. Brandon made the first move. Everything went according to his plan. The target was heading straight into a hornet's nest, as it seemed to Brandon himself. Their naivety played into the hands of the organization. If everything continued like this, their plan would be successful. A tall man with a blue beard and mohawk hair of the same color, wearing glasses, stepped forward. The next move would be theirs. The hat made sure of the fighting spirit of his subordinate. He remains to watch. A moment, and a great trembling ran through Iroquois's body. His body underwent a metamorphosis. His teeth lengthened and took the form of boar's tusks. His skin became blood red with places of blue fur. The winged creature with a pig's fanged head was ready. The professor was sitting in the laboratory in the company of a nurse. Vanessa's tests showed that the treatment could have a positive result. A stem cell transplant was necessary, and the sister's cells matched the girl's cells, which pleased the scientist. The professor brought the results to Vanessa's father. The good news touched the father's heart in the past. His whole life would not have been enough for him to earn money for such an operation. The man was immensely grateful to the scientist and wanted to thank the latter, to which the elder only grinned and told the father to carefully watch what was happening through the cameras in order to notice the enemy in time. The professor also thanked the father for teaching Vanessa computer skills. Her knowledge greatly helped the team in performing operations. The girl made a great contribution to the common cause. A sudden explosion shook the research complex. One of the complex's compartments was leveled to the ground by a monstrous explosion, the kinetic force of which reverberated throughout the entire structure. The shockwave was so powerful that it seemed to people that the Earth's surface was covered with cracks and plates collided. Marking the beginning of an earthquake, vibrations and roars shook the entire structure. Iroquois bombarded the complex, generating balls of purple flame with his hands. He sent blows one after another, destroying the research center into pieces as everything went smoothly. The pink-haired sister tried to hold on to something, but the floor was shaking and kinetic vibrations shook her body. She was overcome by fear. She prayed that this chaos would end soon. It was necessary to act quickly. The professor decided to check the situation. He asked the man what was happening and whether he could see from the cameras who attacked them. How could Brandon leave at the wrong time? The bristly man feverishly began to analyze the data from the cameras, unfortunately. Some of the cameras were damaged or completely destroyed by the explosion, while others did not show the enemy. Patrick jumped into the rhinoceros with lightning speed. Only he alone separated those who were dear to him with death. The rhinoceros let out a roar and rushed to the epicenter of the explosions. In the sky, he saw a winged creature shredding the complex with flames. The complex was protected by a barrier that the red monster was able to break through. Then everything could have been even worse. Red was preparing for a new attack by generating fiery balls around himself. Patrick's brain was working at full capacity. This had to be stopped. The fat man told the professor to open the gate to attack the monster, and also apply electricity to the fence and turn on the gas. The professor followed all the instructions with lightning speed, warning Patrick to be careful. There was no doubt that it was a representative of the organization, and he knew that this was just the beginning. Patrick prepared the rhinoceros's main combat systems for battle, although the enemy took them by surprise. They were by no means defenseless. The fat man brought the armored personnel carrier onto a combat trajectory. A green beam of black energy flew out of the transport in the direction of the red monster. Patrick wanted to cause maximum damage and catch his opponent when he was not expecting an attack. The beam almost reached the creature's carcass, but it dodged. It was incredible with what grace and flexibility the monster avoided all the rhinoceros's shots. It made pirouettes and loops in the sky, dodging attacks. Brandon flew into the territory of the organization, but he was haunted by vague anxiety. The sudden disappearance of the signal from the complex made Brandon think that he was already on the territory of the organization and there was nothing to worry about. He hoped that his friends were okay. He made all kinds of preparations for the attack on the complex in order to protect his friends. The young man prayed for his friends, and with determination, he accelerated. Before he had time to assess the terrain, a cannonade of fiery rays pierced the heavens from the ground. Only his reflexes helped the swordsman maneuver to the side, avoiding the destruction of the mech. On the ground, he saw groups of combat mechs sending volleys of their guns at him. These robots were smaller and more imperfect than his mechs, but they took their toll in numbers. The purple coloring was clearly visible against the gray background of the road on which they stood. This could only mean one thing. A mechanic of the organization from the future returned to their time. Such an appearance did not bode well. The mechs they built posed a great threat. Having sent back fire from the guns, the shells collided with an obstacle. The swordsman was surprised to encounter barriers on these drones. This situation was even more dangerous for him. But if the option of long-range attacks was impossible, then close-range attacks remained the way out of the situation, picking up speed. The mech forcefully kicked one of the drones. Having destroyed one of this steel flock, his radar alerted him to the approach of targets from the air. To his surprise, the drones were equipped with not only a barrier, but also boosters. Trying to stop it, Brandon fired a number of missiles at this swarm. Such weapons could penetrate the shield and cause irreparable damage to the mechs. He had a large arsenal of weapons. The skies were colored with a series of fiery flashes like fireworks. Flying mechs exploded one after another. Missiles easily found their target and opened the barrier like a knife to a can. Of course, watching the rhinoceros and the Iroquois was a fascinating activity, but the hat and the long hair had their own role in this battle. Having tied up Patrick in battle and creating a gap, they had to infiltrate the complex. But their task was complicated by the presence of a fence with hundreds of volts on its rings. In addition, gas was sprayed around it. If they tried to pass, they would probably die. But it seemed that the hat had a plan. Longhair caught himself thinking that he had plans within plans for everything. Asking the hat what they would do, he replied that he had an idea. Sitting behind the surveillance cameras, Bristle asked the situation from the professor and the pink-haired nurse. His voice trembled under anxiety and adrenaline, however. So far, Patrick has managed to cope with Red. A sudden flash of pain dug into the man's neck like needles, touching the place of pain. He felt a wet spot on his fingers. Bristle did not understand how this could happen. Without having time to analyze the situation, liquid gushed from the neck like a bloody fountain. The blood was leaving the body of the girl's father so actively that he only fell weakly and convulsed on the floor, not having the strength to do anything. The last drops poured out of the man's lifeless body, when the pool of blood in which Bristle one lay began to transform into a humanoid silhouette. The hat penetrated the complex. Smiling at his triumph, the hat was pleased with the result. It took him a lot of effort to carve a bloody mark on Vanessa's father's body without being noticed. Everything was done perfectly. Patrick kept chasing the monster, like a kitten chasing its shadow. Red maneuvered so skillfully that so far not a single projectile had reached its target. This angered the fat man. In an attempt to inflict at least some damage on the beast, the rhino fired a series of homing missiles. Patrick thought that at least this should have some effect. But this user differed from each other in his colossal strength and a whole palette of different abilities and skills. None of the missiles reached their target. Patrick could not do anything to oppose the flame of the creature. But nevertheless, covered by the smoke from the detonated missiles, Patrick fired a salvo from the rhinoceros gun. Red did not have time to react and was knocked to the ground. The fiend's body crashed to the ground with a crash, but the falling balls of dust revealed the appearance of a whole and unharmed creature. The red one was already generating a new wave of energy to hit the rhinoceros. Patrick did not have time to move the rhinoceros away from the path of fire, when a purple flash of light blinded everything around. This time, Red's ball reached its target. The armored personnel carrier was hit. The horned head relaxed a little. The monster's mouth curved in a smile initially. Red was afraid of such powerful weapons of these people, but he was tired of these games and he decided to take the goal seriously. In an instant, closing the distance to the wreckage of the rhinoceros, the winged horror landed on the body, one way or another, but it was just a mechanism controlled by a person, which was easy to handle. Having opened the armored body, the armor plates were torn off the rhinoceros's skin with a grinding sound. Grinning, the creature stuck its muzzle into the opened opening where Patrick was waiting for him with a pistol at the ready. A second, and a projectile erupted from the barrel of a black metal pistol, piercing right through the monster's shoulder. Red did not expect such pressure, and therefore did not have time to react. It would be interesting with this man. The multi-ton body of the fiend fell on its back. Slightly dimmed eyes distinguished the male body. Now Red was beginning to understand why the organization had chosen him for this task. Patrick pointed the gun at his head. Patrick couldn't hear well what the monster was muttering under his breath. When his face half metamorphosed into a human one, the fat man couldn't believe his eyes. It was his old friend. There was chaos in the laboratory. The wind whistled through the hole in the ceiling, walking around the room. But fortunately, Pink and the professor did not notice any damage to the tank with Vanessa. Electricity worked intermittently, informing everyone that the main power source was not working. The energy was supplied by another. This was dangerous for the girl's life. But to the horror of the professor, the container with stem cells for the girl was destroyed. The operation to introduce them was impossible. It was necessary to look for another way. All was not lost. Vanessa's father could be used as a donor, which Pink immediately informed the scientist about. The idea itself was possible, but difficult to implement. The discussion of the upcoming operation that had begun was interrupted by the sarcastic voice of a stranger who entered the hat. With a sly smile, informed those present that the girl's father could not help them. People in the laboratory saw this man for the first time, a blond man with medium hair, wearing a business suit, glasses, and a hat, introduced himself and apologized for any inconvenience he had caused. The professor looked dumbfounded at the stranger, how he managed to penetrate the complex and what this man did with Bristle. And whether he was a person at all, everything inside the old man went cold. The hat unarmedly raised his hands up, declaring that he was not their enemy. But he had to use the blood and flesh of a man to move here. This information did not make anyone in the laboratory feel any better. The scientist's voice changed to a scream. He accused all members of the organization as madmen and murderers. The hat reassured the old man, because the girl's father had not died, he himself would soon turn into a zombie. The hat reassured those present by saying that he did not wish harm to anyone. He was sent by the court organization to take care of Vanessa and the professor, but the elder was not going to help them. He felt there was a catch. The scientist did not want to work for them or help them in any other way. Everyone in this organization was trying to get him, and he was afraid to imagine for what purpose. Brandon told a lot about the organization itself and its people. The hat saw this, but asked the professor whether he had told the whole truth and whether he should even trust this man. The sounds of breaking metal and steel did not stop. One by one, the organization's mechs fell, although it seemed to Brandon that the stream of their attacks was endless, and they themselves would never end. Several more mechs surrounded him on the flanks and began to pour a barrage of fire and shells. But so far, the force field of the young man's mechs could cope with the load. But how long would he last? For a long time, he did not allow himself to be fired upon his palette of guns, and cartridges had enough variety for everyone. And Brandon's next wave of shots hit several more attackers. Brandon stood surrounded by the wreckage of the drones. He noted that despite their impressive firepower, they were nothing more than mindless constructs that the swordman dealt with. Suddenly, the radar sharply showed a huge object right next to Brandon. A white, dragon-like creature appeared from nowhere in front of him. The monster was white in color with a lavender mane and a narrow mouth with rows of teeth. The creature's appearance was enhanced by a pair of wings. Brandon chuckled to himself. The diverse form of the organization's members always surprised him. Yet his enemies were endowed with a special aesthetic, however. This did not make it any easier. The monster rushed to attack and sent a series of blue volleys of energy at the mecha, but it was difficult to take Brandon by surprise. Despite its massive appearance, the mecha easily dodged to the side. Arrow-like volleys landed a couple of centimeters from where Brandon was. These were not just projectiles. They followed his mech until it collided with an obstacle. The monster concentrated energy in the eye area, blinding the fur with a green glow like a lantern. But although it did not cause harm to humans, the radiation itself slowed down all the structures of their black metal. The young man tried to move the shackled robot to no avail. Before he had time to think of something, the monster doused him with an endless stream of pink flames from its mouth. The fur was burning. Patrick never moved the gun from its place. Holding his what he thought was a dead friend at gunpoint, he could not believe his eyes that old Iroquois was alive. As indeed the user himself was no less surprised at this meeting. The angry fat man demanded answers as to why his friend joined an organization that sought to start a new apocalypse on Earth, what happened to him, and how he could do this. Patrick's resentment knew no bounds with tears in his eyes. He demanded an explanation of why he killed their mutual friends. All of them, including him, considered him their brother and trusted him completely. This decision was not easy for Iroquois. He admitted that in the course of carrying out his tasks with the people, Iroquois decided to end this matter by announcing his last participation in this business, which did not suit the state. Patrick's friend tells how the Organization of Darkness helped him escape. Later, he returned for his friends, but Patrick himself was not there. Patrick asks if he brought their two comrades into the Organization of Darkness and if they are alive. A friend invites Patrick to return to them, and then their gang can reunite again. Patrick is angry that in the organization where humanity is exterminated and turned into monsters, there is no place for him, and his friend himself has become a monster and will also drag his comrades there. A friend suggests remembering the days when they robbed the rich, giving everything to the poor, and were glorious, but they could not continue to live like that for the rest of their lives. The organization helps create superhumans, but before they didn't even have documents, just a bunch of enemies on their tail. But Patrick cannot be persuaded. He swings the ball and cuts off his friend's tail with it. The fat man once again asks his friend if their comrades Kun and Xiao are alive. His friend realizes that Patrick has not changed and is still as stubborn, so he flies up. Preparing to attack, he says that since he does not want to go with him, he will see those two. Grandpa Henry says that Brandon has his own reasons, but he is trying to protect Vanessa, and there is no need to sow discord between them. Little does the man know what they had to go through, but how can he explain the scene he is witnessing? Pointing to Vanessa, he says that this is a standard experiment to create an anomaly. The man says that apparently Brandon decided to make an anomalist who would obey him, so he cultivated a feeling of affection in her. No one knows what he means when he says Brandon hid his identity as a mechanic well. He says that mechanics will not disdain any methods to study black gold and its effect on people. The man goes to the computer and starts doing something there, which worries Grandpa Henry. He says that it's nothing special. He'll just help finish what he started. And although he's not a mechanic, he listens well to what's going on around him. You just need to introduce amendments and then she will become an anomalist, loyal to the Organization of Darkness. The more anomalies they have, the stronger they are, the man says. And something begins to happen to Vanessa. Grandpa Henry is angry. He swings at the inhuman scoundrels and tells them to get out. But suddenly everything starts to burn, and Henry has to retreat with his rage. Then Bo appears and is asked to be careful with playing with fire in the laboratory. But he's just excited. He can't wait to meet his partner. He leans over Vanessa and, stroking the flask, says that he has a small connection with her. The man asks whether all the mechanisms around the institute have been eliminated and receives a positive answer. Bo says he'd like to have some fun and burn someone, but there's no one here. He points to the girl and asks the boss if he can burn her. He is allowed, but in a different place. The man reaches out to her with his burning hand, asking her to scream louder than he will. But he stops, because another anomaly breaks into the laboratory. It was Emmy. She looks down, her gaze lighting up the entire room and everyone inside in green. With a swing of her tail, she pushes Bo away, and thereby blows off his boss's head. Grandpa Henry is glad to see her, says that it was well done, and asks to kick them out of the laboratory. Dr. Amelia rushed to the computer to return the original data, but the process itself with black gold cannot be reversed. The light from Emmy's eyes envelops Vanessa, and the doctor sees that the black gold's activity is decreasing. She asks Emmy to continue irradiating the baby because it slows down the mutation. Brother Brandon said that in an emergency, we need to start a data backup program. Suddenly, someone attacks Emmy from behind, and she is unable to continue irradiating Vanessa. A guy from the Organization of Darkness enters the laboratory again. He recognizes Emmy, who they are looking for. He says that the authorities ordered her to be liquidated if she could not be brought in alive. This guy attacks with a blue wave from his hand, but Emmy receives his attack by opening her mouth. They continue the battle, during which they drop the stand with the flasks and everything breaks. At this point, Brandon is also fighting, and he doesn't like that too much energy is being spent on the shield. He wants to hit the anomaly quickly and releases a lot of flame from his robot. The robot moves away from the next attack and responds by sending metal bullets. When the monster is distracted by them, Brandon wields a chainsaw and advances on the enemy. He wounds her and, making a circle, flies high to be above the anomalist. The main character lands, crushing the monster's head, and burns the rest of the body so as not to leave a residue. Brandon notices the girl who has been watching the entire battle and aims a laser at her. He demolishes the corner of the building, but the girl is nearby and says that with such strength he deserves to be called a mechanic. The guy tries to kill her, but the girl moves, saying how sorry she is that he wasn't on the mechanics' council. Brandon tisks, gritting his teeth, and says that this is the one who also managed to teleport. He moves towards her, but she, holding out her hand, fetters all movements of his robot. The student begins to lose control of the fur. The energy output has greatly decreased. He asks when she is and who she is, and whether she is a traitor on the council. She says that she was the great wise Bey on the Council of Mechanics, so he should know her. The girl makes a small downward movement with her hand and presses the entire Brandon robot to the ground. She explains that this black gold control technology won't be around for 100 years, and she would be wise to join the organization. The guy laughs because no one expected or could have thought that this great wise Bey. Brandon heard that she died or went missing, but it turns out that she was a henchman of the Organization of Darkness. He says that by continuing to do this, she will only disgrace her grandfather, the sage Dr. Henry. But the girl says that she joined the organization only to implement her plan. Her grandfather created a theory about black gold. It only complemented his works. Brandon asks if her plan is to turn everyone into anomalies, and believes that she was the one who killed the fellow mechanics. She told the truth, but they didn't believe her. And so that unnecessary people do not interfere, they should be gotten rid of. He says that if Brandon takes a different approach, he will eventually become just like them. A meteorite carrying a zombie virus fell to the ground and infected people through the process of photosynthesis in human bodies, which is how black gold was created. This is her theory, but the fact that not the full version was made public, the Council of Mechanics decided to hush up this idea. In the end, it became nothing more than a city rumor, and she was given a non-disclosure order. Did keeping the secret prompted her to fake her death and get rid of unwanted people? 5 months ago, what brought the zombie virus to Earth was a small meteorite with a diameter of no more than 30 meters. In 100 years, the same one will fall, but 10 times larger than the previous one. The first was only reconnaissance, and in the second, they will concentrate their forces. Brandon, listening to the girl, apparently began to understand her and that she was telling the truth. Even if it is an ordinary meteorite, it cannot be destroyed by weapons, and it is also a high-speed asteroid with high-energy radiation. The space industry fell into disrepair, and the Mechanics' Council continued to ignore it. But when the situation became dire, they used the remaining resources to build a secret spaceship for the council members. Fortunately, the damaged time machine was dug up and repaired, although only the consciousness of 1 or 2 people could be sent back into the past. Since the destruction of the Earth is inevitable, then what is the point of returning to this moment in time? When the meteorite falls, everyone will turn into zombies, and those with immunity will gain superpowers. She just accelerated the process to get black gold in its pure form. To combat a greater catastrophe that will happen in 100 years, she intends to unite the forces of all people and anomalies. At this time, in the laboratory where Vanessa lies, a battle takes place between Emmy and the messenger of the Organization of Darkness. Grandpa Henry was covered with pieces from the collapse. He opens his eyes and sees Dr. Amelia in front of him, unconscious. The boss whose head was blown off is alive? He says that it is unwise to take on a defective item. He approaches Grandfather Henry, who is lying down, and removes the debris from him, but receives only insults in response. He says they were required to protect him, one of his granddaughter's few requests. He says that in 30 years she will become the great wisest of mechanics, and in 100, as a technical advisor to the Organization of Darkness, she will lead everyone and conquer half of the Earth. Grandfather Henry is very disappointed. He asks again if his granddaughter is a member of the Organization of Darkness. She is one of the founders of the organization. Like an ancestor. If she had healthy legs, maybe she would be able to achieve great success. Grandpa Henry begins to understand what happened one day and is speechless. 10 years ago, as a result of his experiment, she lost her legs, and his son, with whom his relationship was already strained, took her abroad. With the onset of the apocalypse, it's hard for even ordinary people to survive, let alone disabled people. But she never blamed him, but on the contrary, She always defended him. Grandpa Henry is sad. He also misses her very much and feels guilty. After all, the reason he is so nice to Vanessa is because she reminds him of his granddaughter. The boss wakes up partner Joe and says it's time to get Grandpa Henry and Dr. Amelia back to their jobs. Bo, who is already lifting Dr. Amelia, gets distracted by something and freezes. Vanessa's father is standing in the aisle. But there is a problem. He turned into an ordinary zombie. The boss asks his partner Bo to deal with him, but he is scared because this is not an ordinary zombie standing in front of him. He immediately uses his superpower, but the problem is that fire does not take him. Amelia opens her eyes and sees Vanessa's father, who has turned into a zombie, grabbing the guy's hand. But the boss kicks him in the chest and says that at crucial moments something always goes wrong. The girl looks down, and Annie lies there, amazed, and her enemy is standing on top of her. He exalts himself, telling her to accept her fate because he has no equal in speed. Patrick's friend looms over him, ready to kill him, and says that he is merciful to him, and it is better to become abnormal. A bright green light flew vertically into the center of the building, casting its green rays. Smirking, the guy cannot believe the words of the gray-haired girl, considering it a crazy theory. The girl begins to explain to the guy that as long as black gold exists, all living things will be wiped off the face of the earth. Next, the girl says that the only way to avoid this catastrophe is to become an abnormalist. The main character is interested in what exactly she needs from him. The guy refuses the girl's offer to become abnormal. The hero claims that he is not interested in messing around and controlling mutants. The young man develops a protective system, presented in the form of blue shells. Suddenly, the hero begins to shoot from his durable armored suit. The gray-haired girl begins to float in the sky, wrapping her pink aura around her. The girl holds her hand in front of her, intending to damage the main character. The guy's robot receives a powerful and sudden blow from a gray-haired girl. The girl creates a ball around herself, thereby protecting herself from the fiery blows of her opponent. The robot holds its hand forward from which electrical discharges emanate. The guy boasts about the impenetrable power of his armor suit, maintaining a calm expression on her face. The girl surrounds herself with bright lighting effects. The robot releases electrical force through its metal palm. A conversation arose between the two opposing sides. A confrontation between a robot controlled by the main character and a girl who was in the ball. The hero, thoughtful, says that he is the only one people could rely on. The girl, interested, asks the hero if he can find the best way to save humanity. The guy gives a convincing answer that he won't know until he tries. The gray-haired girl ridicules the guy for being ready to trust people, knowing about their weakness and selfishness. Suddenly, a green figure of a girl appears in the sky in the form of an anomalous creature, emitting its light. The guy is surprised by the sudden appearance of the girl in a new look. The girl, sincerely not understanding, asks the guy why he is opposing the anomalous if he himself created the same one. The girl, floating in the sky, begins to absorb the power of the gray-haired girl. Amazed by Vanessa's strength, the girl cannot believe that this girl was able to absorb her powers, and Brandon stands in surprise at what is happening. The guy, his mouth open in surprise, wonders how the girl was able to absorb the energy of black gold. Vanessa happily declares that she will finally be able to help everyone by clearing the zombies of energy. Soaring in the sky, the girl reports that she does not know how much longer she can hold out. Next, the girl, looking at the guy, says that the main character met her in the past. A gray-haired girl with confusion on her face listens as the girl talks about her. From what she heard, the girl asks Vanessa if she can read minds. The girl is glad that she was always surrounded by support, and that she felt good nature in every person. An old man bends over a dead man lying on the ground, reacting in distress, while a pink-haired girl in the background mourns the girl whose head she holds in her hands. A girl with an upset face looks at her sister, holding her in her arms, and nearby lies the blonde-haired friend of the protagonist. The fat guy watches in horror at the old man lying opposite him. The girl says goodbye to everyone, asking Brandon to take care of himself and take care of the future of humanity. Abstract background with a predominance of green color, in the center of which there is a white star with long rays diverging in different directions.